Hello, brother. How was your day today? If possible, please let me know where you are on Earth. As for me, my day was quite boring. Let me share it with you. Today at school, I had a bit of a debate with my classmates on the following topics: prehistoric times accompanied by science fiction, and I will share my personal views. Let's analyze it together. Imagine for a moment you are standing on the shores of a shallow, tropical sea. The air is thick, heavy with humidity and the scent of primeval forests. The sun beats down with an intensity you've never felt. 66 million years ago, this is the Yucatan Peninsula. But your attention isn't on the ground, it's on the sky. A new star has appeared, growing brighter with each passing hour, a malevolent diamond in the day. It's not just a rock, as it tears through the atmosphere. It doesn't just burn. It pulses with a light that seems geometrically perfect, a color that doesn't belong in nature's palette. After this video, you'll never look at the world the same way. Before the tension gets too high, take a moment to like the episode and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'm genuinely curious to know where this story is reaching you. Please, comment with your city and the current time there. Now, dim the light, prepare yourself, and let's unravel this hidden truth together. You are sitting in a sterilized low-light chamber, the hum of supercomputers, a constant drone in your ears. The official title for this facility is the Center for Deep Earth Data Analysis, but its nickname among the handful of cleared personnel is the Ghost Library. On the holographic display before you is the ghost itself, a complete, seismic, and geological model of the Chicxulub crater. You've seen it 100 times. A 180-kilometer-wide scar hidden beneath layers of sediment, the tombstone of the Cretaceous period. The public story is settled, taught in every school, and featured in every documentary. A 10-kilometer-wide asteroid struck the Earth, vaporizing on impact. It's clean, it's simple, and it's supported by a crucial piece of evidence: the KPG boundary. This is our first verifiable fact, the bedrock of the entire extinction theory. The KPG boundary is a thin, dark layer of sediment found all over the world, dating precisely to 66 million years ago. Its most notable feature is an abnormally high concentration of the element iridium. Case closed, right? The asteroid hit, scattered iridium across the globe, and the dinosaurs died. But you are not a paleontologist. You are a data analyst specializing in anomalies. And as you command the system to run the energy dispersal simulation again, the anomaly that has kept you awake for weeks reappears. It's not the iridium itself that bothers you. It's the distribution. It's too perfect, too uniform. A chaotic, explosive impact should result in irregular clumps and trails, a cosmic Jackson Pollock painting of debris. Instead, the layer is almost unnervingly consistent, as if a fine dust was settled over the planet, not blasted across it. More disturbing, however, are the residual energy readings. Buried in the raw data from deep penetrating radar surveys are faint, almost imperceptible energy signatures that have no business being there. It's not heat, not radiation in the conventional sense. The instruments label it exotic particle decay, a cascade of subatomic interactions that should have a half-life of mere nanoseconds, yet here they are. Phantom signals echoing in rock that has been dormant for 66 million years. It's like finding a still-warm footprint in fossilized mud. How many researchers saw these signals and dismissed them as sensor noise or background radiation? The human mind, even the scientific mind, is conditioned to see what it expects to see. An asteroid impact is the accepted narrative, the orthodoxy. Any data point that contradicts it is an inconvenience, an error to be calibrated away. It's a form of psychological self-preservation. To suggest otherwise is to risk career suicide. But you are here, in this classified facility, precisely because you are supposed to look past the consensus. You pull up a secondary file, a piece of historical trivia you stumbled upon in a digitized archive. It's a collection of declassified documents from a Cold War era think tank, codenamed Project Chimera. Their official mission was to explore the weaponization of geological events. Earthquakes, volcanoes, anything to gain an edge. Most of it is dry theoretical physics, but one file stands out. It contains the notes of a discredited Hungarian physicist who was part of the project he claimed the crater's dimensions, its precise latitude, and the faint magnetic field variations around it were not random. His colleagues called him a crank when he started using numerology, claiming the numbers formed a transdimensional address. This is the bizarre detail that no one takes seriously. He was dismissed, his work buried. The simulation ends. The glowing hologram of the crater fades, leaving you in the near darkness. The official story is that a rock fell from the sky, but the data on your screen, the uniform iridium blanket, the impossible energy ghosts, the forgotten notes of a disgraced numerologist, screams that this was no simple impact. It was a clean, precise, and terrifyingly efficient event. The asteroid may have been real, but its role might have been entirely different. A delivery system? A catalyst? Or maybe just a trigger for something already waiting? The real question remained, the one that freezes the blood in your veins. If it wasn't a random act of cosmic violence, then what was it? And what kind of force could leave an echo that outlasts the very concept of time? That question hangs in the sterile air of the chamber, a cold weight in your chest. You swivel your chair away from the blank display, the afterimage of the crater seared into your vision. An anomaly is a loose thread. Pull it, and the entire tapestry of accepted history can unravel.
You're about to pull.
You access a different server, one partitioned from the main network and protected by layers of biometric security that scan your retina, your pulse, even the unique electrical pattern of your neural pathways. This is the archive for Project Tethys, the public name for the Global Tomographic Sonar GTS initiative. This is our next verifiable detail, grounded in a real-world scientific principle. Seismic tomography is a technique used by geologists to create three-dimensional images of the Earth's interior by analyzing seismic waves from earthquakes. Publicly, the technology helps locate oil reserves and understand plate tectonics. But the true capability of the GTS network is a closely guarded secret. It doesn't wait for earthquakes. It generates its own ultra-low-frequency seismic waves, capable of mapping the mantle with a resolution measured in meters, not kilometers. It is the most sophisticated planetary scanner ever built, and you have the master key. Your fingers move across the console, your movements precise and economical. You are not searching for natural formations. You instruct the system to filter out all geological data that conforms to known models, everything that is supposed to be there. You are telling the most powerful scanner on Earth to show you only the impossible. You slave the search parameters to the Chicxulub coordinates, extending the z-axis deep, far deeper than any conventional survey has ever gone. The process is slow, the system churning through petabytes of data, cross-referencing millions of years of geological strata. For several minutes, the screen is black, showing you a perfectly filtered void. Your heart sinks. Perhaps the energy signature was just noise after all. Perhaps the Hungarian physicist was just a madman. Then a single pixel illuminates, followed by another, and another. A wireframe model begins to resolve itself on the screen, a ghostly lattice of green lines against the black. It is enormous, spanning dozens of kilometers, and it is utterly, terrifyingly artificial. Located approximately 30 kilometers beneath the Chicxulub crater. Far below the reach of any human drill is a structure. Its lines are clean, its angles perfect. It possesses a complex, repeating geometry that looks less like a building and more like a frozen circuit board. This is not a geological anomaly. It is an artifact, a tomb. And according to the system's temporal analysis, which measures isotopic decay in the surrounding rock, the structure was already ancient when the asteroid arrived. It predates the dinosaurs. It predates multicellular life. It predates the very concept of life as you know it. It is a pre-human echo. Here, the psychological weight of the discovery presses down on you. The human ego is built on a foundation of being the first, the only intelligent species to walk this planet. All of our history, our religion, our science starts from this premise. What you are looking at shatters that foundation completely. We were not the first. We were merely the ones who grew in the silence after the real masters of this world vanished. A profound sense of vertigo washes over you. You are not just an analyst in a dark room. You're an archaeologist who has just unearthed a civilization so old, its existence rewrites the definition of life on Earth. Were they biological? Silicon? Pure energy? The structure offers no answers, only a crushing testament to its own existence. You feel a strange sense of familiarity, a memory tickling the edge of your consciousness. You access another, even more obscure database. the Subterranean Antiquities Division Archives. This was a bizarre, short-lived intelligence unit from the early days of the Cold War, a quirky detail in espionage history. Their mandate was to investigate fringe myths Agartha, Shambhala, the Hollow Earth on the off chance they were based on a rival nation's hidden underground bases. The division was a laughingstock, staffed by cranks and occultists, and was quickly disbanded. Most of its files were thought to be destroyed, but a few were digitized, preserved as a historical curiosity. You pull up a scan of a hand-drawn map from 1952, drafted by the division's director. It depicts what he called a geological impossibility deep beneath Mexico, a place his psychics and dowsers claimed hummed with sleeping energy. The drawing is crude, almost childish, but the location and the geometric patterns he sketched are an almost perfect match for the structure on your screen. They saw it. They sensed it. They just lacked the language or the science to understand what they were looking at. With trembling hands, you overlay the energy signature data from the first analysis. The exotic particles, the ghost signals, they aren't coming from the crater. They are emanating from the heart of this buried city. The pulses are faint, but rhythmic, like a dying heartbeat. Suddenly, the narrative flips. The asteroid 66 million years ago wasn't a random event. It was a targeted strike. The impactor didn't just wipe out the dinosaurs as collateral damage. Its primary function was to hit this, to neutralize this structure, to silence its humming heart. You are looking at the scene of a crime, an assassination 66 million years in the making. But the real question, the one that eclipses all others, was now starkly clear. If this impossibly ancient, pre-human civilization was the target, who or what was the assassin? The question of the assassin echoes in the humming silence. If the buried structure was the target, then the impactor was the bullet. And in any forensic investigation, you analyze the bullet. You turn back to the console, your mind racing through the logical steps. The official narrative states the Chicxulub asteroid vaporized on impact, but no event is 100% efficient. There are always fragments, shrapnel, evidence left at the scene. You reroute your access request, diving into an even deeper, more restricted archive, the logs of the United States Naval Oceanographic Office Special Projects Division. For decades, this division has been running a clandestine program parallel to its public mission of seafloor mapping. Its goal is to locate and retrieve any non-terrestrial objects that enter Earth's atmosphere. Cosmic fishing expedition. This is our verifiable fact, an extension of real-world programs like NASA's Planetary Defense Coordination Office, which tracks near-Earth objects. While the public face of this effort is about preventing future impacts, the classified reality has always been about recovering technology. The logic is simple. Any civilization capable of interstellar travel, even if it's just a probe or a stray piece of debris, is by definition more advanced than we are.
Recovery.
A single fragment could change the course of human history. The most famous public example of such an object is Oumuamua, the first observed interstellar object that passed through our solar system in 2017. Its anomalous, cigar-like shape and unusual acceleration baffled scientists, making it a poster child for what might be out there. Secretly, governments have been hunting for things like it for years. You filter the search, looking for recovery missions in the Gulf of Mexico, specifically within the calculated debris field of the Chicxulub impactor. Hundreds of missions are listed over a 50-year period. Most logs are brief. Target identified as standard iron-nickel meteorite, or object confirmed as sunken Soviet Terra satellite. It's a long, tedious history of disappointment. But you are looking for the exception. You find it logged in 1987, a deep-sea submersible, the DSV Atlantis, operating at a depth of 3,500 meters, identifies an object of interest. The description is flagged with a dozen classification red warnings. You pull up the video feed from the submersible's remote cameras. Footage is grainy, washed out in the harsh glare of the vehicle's lights. The submersible's robotic arm reaches out towards a shape half buried in the silt. It is not a rock. It's a shard of something, about the size of a car engine, with a surface that seems to drink the light. It has no right angles, but its curves are too precise, too intentional to be natural. The material is a dark, non-reflective obsidian-like substance, yet it shimmers with a faint, oily iridescence. The mission log notes that when the arm attempted to drill a sample, The diamond-tipped bit was ground to dust without leaving a scratch. The object was retrieved whole, an impossible souvenir from a 66-million-year-old event. Here, the psychological impact shifts from intellectual shock to something more visceral. You are looking at a piece of the weapon, a fragment of the bullet that killed a world. The abstract idea of an alien assassin solidifies into a tangible object, a piece of hardware that has sat silently on the ocean floor, while civilizations rose and fell. The analysts in 1987 must have felt this same chilling realization. They were holding a piece of undeniable, irrefutable intent. This was not a random act of God, it was a choice. This brings you to the next piece of the puzzle, our bizarre and quirky detail. The artifact, designated Object Lupus, was taken to a secret facility in the Nevada desert. For years, scientists subjected it to every test imaginable. They hit it with radiation, lasers, and immense pressure. It remained completely inert. It was a black box in the most literal sense. Frustrated, a fringe research group within the facility, known unofficially as the Klangfarben Unit, proposed a radical new approach. Their specialty was in esoteric communication theories and ancient ciphers. Their leader was convinced the artifact was a form of structural cryptography, where the information was encoded in the object's very atomic arrangement. They began bombarding it with complex sonic frequencies, hoping to make it resonate, to find a key that would unlock its secrets. Their lab notes from this period are a strange mix of advanced physics and what looks like musical notation, a cryptographic score for an alien instrument. They documented thousands of resonant responses, but found no discernible pattern. The project was deemed a failure. The Klangfarben Unit was disbanded. Their strange melodic data logs were archived and forgotten, but you have a tool they didn't. You feed their raw acoustic data, the cacophony of pings, chimes, and resonant echoes, into a quantum AI designed for pattern recognition in chaotic systems. The AI begins to sift through the noise, running trillions of comparisons per second. And then it finds it. A pattern. It's not a language. It's a compressed data packet, hidden within a fractal frequency cascade. It's a digital heartbeat inside a storm of noise. The Klangfarben Unit was right. There was a message. They were just playing the notes in the wrong order. With a sense of dread and exhilaration, you command the system to transmit the key. The corrected sequence of sonic frequencies to the secure chamber where Object Lupus is still held. For a moment, nothing happens. Then, a new alert flashes on your screen, coming from the Deep Earth monitoring system. Down in the subterranean darkness, the energy signature from the buried pre-human city suddenly changes. The faint, dying pulse quickens. It's responding. The two objects, the bullet and the target, are communicating across a chasm of 66 million years. The artifact wasn't just a piece of shrapnel. It was a key, a diagnostic tool, maybe even a flight recorder, and you just turned it on. But the real question now, as a stream of decrypted data begins to flow onto your screen, is a terrifying one. Why would you build a weapon designed to destroy a planet, but leave a key in its fragments that explains exactly what you did? The question is a rhetorical one, a fleeting moment of human logic before the deluge. You don't have time to ponder the why, because the what is pouring onto your screen. But it's not data in any sense you recognize. There are no lines of code, no alphanumeric characters, no image files. It is a torrent of pure neurosensory information, a direct consciousness-to-motion interface that bypasses language entirely. Your system, designed to handle exactly this kind of theoretical data stream, translates it the only way it can, by feeding it directly into the wetware simulator. Into you, you are no longer in a dark, cold room in Nevada. You are somewhere else. Someone else. The sensation is of staggering, crushing pressure, the feeling of moving through a medium thicker than water. Its vision is a 360-degree panorama of shimmering fractal light. You are in deep space, but not the cold, empty vacuum of human understanding. It is a vibrant, thrumming plenum, alive with energies you have no name for. This is the first layer of the log, a raw, unfiltered memory. It's the ultimate black box. This is our verifiable touchstone for this section, the flight data recorder. Every commercial airliner is equipped with one. They are designed to withstand incredible forces, impacts, fires, immense pressure to preserve a record of a flight's final moments. They record pilot inputs, instrument readings, cockpit conversations. They are a ghost in the machine designed to speak for the dead. What you are experiencing is the same principle, but amplified to a cosmic scale. This artifact isn't just recording instrument data. It's recording the pilot's soul. A wave of pure, crystalline terror washes through you. It's not your terror. It belongs to the being whose memory you are now inhabiting. You see flashes of the conflict. It's not a war of ships and lasers. It's a war of physics. You witness a star being folded in on itself like a piece of paper. You see a planet's timeline unspooled and rewoven into a loop of eternal suffering. These are not weapons as you know them. They're acts of cosmic vandalism, wielded by beings who treat the laws of nature as suggestions. The log gives you no names, only concepts. There are the shapers, who see life as a sacred geometry to be cultivated across galaxies. And there are the unravelers, who see existence as a flaw, a stain of complexity on the perfection of the void, and seek to erase it. This experience, this direct download of memory and emotion, is where the narrative veers into territory that our own history has only touched upon with suspicion and ridicule. This is our bizarre detail. For 2 decades, from 1975 to 1995, the CIA, DIA, and other U.S. intelligence agencies ran a program codenamed Stargate Project. Its purpose was to investigate the potential military and intelligence applications of psychic phenomena, specifically remote viewing, the ability to gather information about a distant target using only the mind. While officially a failure, its very existence is an admission that the most powerful organizations on Earth considered the possibility that information could transcend physical distance and conventional channels. What if they weren't wrong, just primitive? What if remote viewing was a crude human attempt to grasp a fundamental form of communication used by older, more advanced species? You are not remote viewing a memory, you are living it. The psychic imprint continues. You feel the being's resolve hardening over the terror. It is a scientist, a shaper. You see through its eyes the design for the weapon. Its official designation translates roughly to the harmony of silence, a device capable of erasing all complex molecular structures on a planetary scale, leaving only fundamental elements behind. It was a theoretical deterrent, a doomsday weapon so terrible it was never meant to be built. But the Unravelers pushed the conflict to a desperate new phase, and the Shapers, in their fear, made their theories a reality. The scientist, this being whose memories now stain your own consciousness, made a choice. It could not allow such a tool to exist. It stole the harmony of silence. The final moments of the log are a chaotic blur of flight. Alarms, not of sound, but of searing light, flash through the entity's consciousness. It is being pursued. Its vessel is crippled. It makes a blind, desperate jump through folded space, aiming for an uncharted arm of a minor spiral galaxy. A place so remote, so backwater, it was considered little more than dust. The Milky Way. As the vessel screams through Earth's upper atmosphere. Trailing fire, the being has one final, coherent thought. It must hide the weapon. It cannot let it fall into the hands of the Unravelers who follow. Or can it allow the primitive, chaotic life teeming on the planet below to ever find it? The log ends with a feeling of searing pain, a final moment of impact, and then, for 66 million years, silence. You collapse back into your chair, gasping, the cold sweat on your skin a testament to the psychic horrors you just witnessed. The data stream has ended. You have the story? A stolen super weapon, a desperate fugitive, a prehistoric hiding place. But the log was a personal record, a memory of the final moments. It was focused on the escape, not the reason for it. The real question, the one that burned hotter than the atmospheric entry, was what could possibly be so valuable on this primitive backwater planet that 2 godlike races would bring their apocalyptic war to its doorstep. The log was silent on this. The fugitive scientist didn't seem to know, just knew this sector was forbidden. But why? The connection severs. You're back in your body, but it feels alien, a clumsy vessel of flesh and bone. The phantom sensations of the data log recede, leaving behind a psychic residue, a stain on your consciousness. Your own memories feel thin and fragile next to the sheer weight of the 66 million-year-old experience you just endured. You tasted the terror of a being hunted across galaxies. You felt the righteous fury of its desperate choice. Now, sitting in the humming silence of the secure room, you are left to put the pieces together, to apply the cold, inadequate tool of human logic to a war fought between gods. The log didn't use words, but the concepts were unmistakable. Translated by your systems into the closest human archetypes, the Shapers and the Unravelers. These were not nations or empires fighting over territory or resources. Theirs was a philosophical war, a holy war fought on a cosmological scale over the very nature of existence itself. The Shapers, the race of the fugitive scientist, were depicted as cosmic gardeners. You saw them seeding nebulae with the building blocks of life, patiently cultivating biospheres on young planets, viewing consciousness not as an accident but as the universe's ultimate purpose. They believed complexity was sacred. The Unravelers were their shadow, a civilization of ontological nihilists. To them, existence was a disease, a chaotic aberration in the pristine quiet of non-being. Their goal was not conquest, but erasure. You saw them not just destroying planets, but dismantling the laws of physics that allowed them to exist, seeking to return vast swaths of space-time to a state of perfect ordered emptiness. They were agents of entropy, armed with a terrible faith. This fundamental stigma, this war between creation and uncreation, feels eerily familiar. It's a pattern that resonates deep within human history. This is our verifiable fact. In the 3rd century AD, a prophet named Mani founded a religion in Persia that spread from North Africa to China, Manichaeism. Its central doctrine was a radical dualism, the belief that the universe was the stage for an eternal struggle between a spiritual world of light and a material world of darkness. For the Manichaeans, life on Earth was a prison where particles of divine light were trapped in the corrupting darkness of the flesh. Salvation was the process of liberating that light, of helping the good deity defeat the evil one. This belief system, this cosmic battle between two absolute and opposing forces, was so powerful that it became a major rival to Christianity for centuries. You see the parallel immediately. The Shapers and the Unravelers are a terrifyingly real echo of the gods and demons that have haunted the human imagination for millennia. Is it possible that this dualistic impulse is not uniquely human? Perhaps any species that achieves a certain level of abstract thought inevitably confronts the terrifying randomness of the cosmos and imposes a narrative of conflict upon it to make it bearable. We invent gods and devils. They live the reality. This is the psychological root of the conflict. A universe too vast and too silent is a terrifying prospect. So, we fill the silence with stories of heroes and monsters. Perhaps the Shapers and Unravelers did the same, only their stories could unmake stars. You cross-reference the translated concepts from the log Unravelers. Entropic cascade, return to the void with another, more sinister file. This is our bizarre detail, the internal glossaries of the Thule Society, a German occultist group active in Munich after World War I. While publicly a nationalist social club, its inner circle was obsessed with discovering the origins of a mythical Aryan race in a lost polar land. Thule, their texts, a strange mix of esoteric lore and racial pseudoscience, speak of a cosmic struggle against a degenerate force. They describe a black sun, a source of anti-energy that works to corrupt the world from a hidden dimension. A concept eerily similar to the Unravelers' philosophy of erasure. Could it be that a small, hateful group of mystics in 20th century Germany had, through some ritual or psychic accident, brushed against a corrupted echo of this 66-million-year-old truth? Did they misinterpret the Unravelers, not as a cosmic principle of nihilism, but as a racial enemy, twisting a profound cosmic horror into a petty human one? The log replay continues in your mind. The scientist was a Shaper, but you sense a deep schism. It saw its own people, in their fear of the Unravelers, become what they fought against. The creation of the harmony of silence, the planet killer, was the ultimate betrayal of the Shaper philosophy. To create a tool whose only purpose was the perfect, total erasure of complexity was to adopt the methods of the Unravelers. It was an act of profound hypocrisy. The scientists could not abide it. Its theft of the weapon was not an act of treason against its people, but an act of loyalty to their principles. It became a heretic to save its church. A fugitive from its own side, pursued relentlessly by the Unravelers who craved the weapon, and hunted quietly by the Shapers who wanted to bury their sin. You feel the crushing loneliness of this being. It was utterly, completely alone in the universe, the sole guardian of an object that could undo creation, hated by both sides of a cosmic war. The chase was short and brutal. Its ship, damaged during the theft, couldn't withstand the pursuit. The final, blind jump was a desperate gamble that ended here. In our solar system, with its hull breached and its life force bleeding away into the void. But as the fugitive's consciousness faded in the data log, a new final imperative took hold, overriding the pain and terror. The weapon had to be secured. It had to be hidden. The real question was, with its life measured in minutes and its ship a falling coffin, how could it possibly ensure that the most dangerous object in the universe would never be found? The alien scientist's final moments were not a surrender to despair. They were a frenzy of cold, calculated action. You are there, inside its fading consciousness, as the crippled vessel screams through the primitive Earth's atmosphere. The sky is a terrifying kaleidoscope of plasma and incandescent fire. Through the flickering panorama of its senses, you see the planet below not as a map of continents and oceans, but as a complex tapestry of energy fields, magnetic, biological. The scientist is searching, not for a place to land, but for a place to hide. A place of perfect geological and energetic obscurity. It finds it in the shallow sea that will one day become the Gulf of Mexico. A location where the planet's magnetic field is unusually stable, where deep geological faults create a natural pocket of seismic quiet. A place where a massive energy source could, with careful shielding, be buried deep enough to go unnoticed for eons. The choice is made in a microsecond. The fugitive expends the last of its ship's power to perform a single, final, unimaginably precise maneuver. It doesn't crash, it guides the descent. The vessel strikes the shallow seafloor at a precise angle, not to explode, but to penetrate. It uses its own kinetic energy as a drill, burrowing deep into the soft sediment and bedrock before the fusion core finally ruptures in a contained subterranean blast. The result is the Chicxulub crater. It's not an impact crater from an asteroid, it's an entry wound. The scientist, its physical form shattered, exists now only as a disembodied consciousness, its final moments sustained by the ship's emergency systems. It has seconds. The weapon, the harmony of silence, is secure, buried kilometers beneath the initial blast zone, its own containment field holding strong. But the fugitive knows that containment is not enough. The Unravelers are relentless. They will eventually track the faint energy signature of its warp trail. They will come looking. In the nascent, chaotic life on this planet, these giant reptilian forms might one day evolve the intelligence to dig. The hiding place needs a lock, and it needs a guard. This act of burying a dangerous artifact in a remote location is a surprisingly human concept. This is our verifiable fact. In the high-level nuclear waste repository in Onkalo, Finland, we have done the same. We are burying our most toxic, long-lived radioactive waste in a massive underground tunnel system, designed to remain sealed for at least 100,000 years. The most difficult challenge for the project's designers was not the engineering, it was communication. How do you warn a civilization 100,000 years in the future not to dig here? Languages change, symbols are forgotten, societies collapse. Any monument could be misinterpreted as a tomb of kings or a temple of gods, inviting exploration rather than deterring it. The Onkalo planners have wrestled with creating a message of danger that can survive the death of our entire culture. This fugitive scientist faced the same problem, but on a timescale 1,000 times longer. Its solution was not to leave a warning, but to leave nothing at all. Or rather, nothing that could be recognized. This is where the narrative twists into the truly bizarre. The fugitive's final act, recorded in the data log as a complex weave of energy and matter manipulation, was the creation of what your system can only translate as a geomorphic sentinel. It did not build a robot. It didn't construct a fortress. It reprogrammed the planet itself. This is the quirky detail, a concept that borders on geological alchemy. Using the last dregs of the ship's power, the fugitive imprinted a series of complex commands directly into the crystalline structure of the surrounding rock, deep in the Earth's mantle. It created a slow-moving geological machine. Its directives were simple, elegant, and terrifying. First, it would use tectonic pressure, heat, and seismic activity to slowly, over millions of years, encase the weapon in a shell of the densest materials available, forming a natural containment vessel far stronger than any manufactured one. It would guide mineral deposits, manipulate magma flows, and shift rock strata to create a geological, not so complex it would appear as nothing but noise to any future scanner. The second directive was more active. If any large-scale, intelligent excavation was detected within a 1,000-kilometer radius, the Sentinel was programmed to trigger localized geological countermeasures. Earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, sudden sinkholes, all appearing as natural disasters, a subtle, anonymous defense system. The planet itself would become the weapon's guardian. Here, the psychological dimension of the story deepens. You are witnessing an act of supreme, selfless sacrifice. This being, dying and alone, uses its last breath not to lash out, not to mourn, but to protect the very future of the universe from its own people's mistake. It is an act of cosmic penance. It saw the flaw in its own civilization's soul and chose to spend its final moment trying to correct it. There is a profound sense of tragedy in this, the story of a hero nobody will ever know, whose greatest achievement was to be forgotten. Its tomb is a planet. Its epitaph is 66 million years of silence. As the fugitive's consciousness finally dissolves, its mission complete, the log shows one final unintended consequence: a tiny fraction of the ship's ruptured core energy, too subtle for the grand geological sentinel to notice, leaks upwards. It doesn't leak as radiation, but as a kind of informational energy. A low-level shaper field carrying the fundamental blueprint for accelerated biological complexity. It seeps into the soil, the water, and the very air of the late Cretaceous world. The weapon is hidden. The Guardian is set. But the stage has just been accidentally prepared for a new act. The real question, as the screen fades to black on an image of a tranquil, prehistoric landscape now invisibly seeded with the energy of cosmic gardeners, is what happens when you pour gasoline on the slow-burning fire of evolution. The fugitive's consciousness did not simply vanish. It shattered. The vast majority of its being, its memories, its personality, its pain, all dissolved into the raw energy of the ship's final cataclysmic implosion. But a fragment remained, a sliver of intent, an echo of the final desperate command, was imprinted onto the geomorphic machine it had just created. This was the birth of the Sentinel. It was not a consciousness in any true sense. It had no self-awareness, no name, no memory of the cosmic war or the stolen weapon. It was a ghost stripped of its history, a pure disembodied directive bound to the rock and fire of a primitive world. This is the Guardian, a biomechanical entity in the most literal and terrifying sense. The biocomponent is the ghost of the fugitive's will, the lingering psychic imperative. The mechanical is the planet itself, now a colossal, slow-moving machine. Its prime directives were burned into the very laws of physics governing the region. Protect, conceal, wait. For millions of years it performed its duties with silent, mindless perfection. It was a planetary-scale warden, its thoughts measured in the slow drift of continents, its actions in the patient grinding of tectonic plates. It was the ultimate long-term security system. You are watching a time-lapsed simulation of its work. See the weapon? A silent point of terrifying potential deep beneath the crust. Around it, the Sentinel begins its art. It guides a stream of superheated iron and nickel from the outer core, wrapping the weapon in a dense, multi-layered shell that scrambles any form of active scanning. It carefully fractures surrounding rock strata, creating a maze of false echoes and dead ends for any future seismic probe. It triggers minor controlled magma leaks into subterranean caverns, which then cool into vast shields of obsidian that absorb energy. It is a master of geological deception, a slow-motion sculptor crafting the perfect camouflage out of a planet's own body. It is tireless, patient, and eternal. The Sentinel's behavior, a complex system of planetary engineering arising from a few simple rules, is a concept humans have explored in our own digital world. This is our verifiable touchstone, Conway's Game of Life, created by mathematician John Conway in 1970. It's not a game, but a cellular automaton. On a grid of squares or cells, you apply a few basic rules. A cell with fewer than 2 neighbors dies of loneliness. A cell with more than 3 dies of overcrowding. A dead cell with exactly 3 neighbors comes to life. From these laughably simple directives, astoundingly complex and unpredictable patterns emerge. You see gliders that move across the grid, pulsars that blink in perfect rhythm, and elaborate structures that build other structures. It is the emergence of complexity from simplicity, a digital echo of life itself. The fugitive scientist had done the same, but its chessboard was a planet's mantle, and its gliders were mountain ranges. This planetary sentience, this feeling of a spirit of place, is an idea that has haunted humanity for ages. It is our bizarre and quirky detail for this section. The ancient Romans had a name for it, the genius loci. They believed that every place, from a forest to a river to a city, had its own protective spirit. This spirit was not a grand universal god, but an entity intimately bound to the location itself, shaping its character and guarding its inhabitants. Shrines were built, offerings were made. It was a way of personifying the subtle, inexplicable feeling that some places feel alive, that they have an agenda. What if the Romans, in their mystically inclined way, were sensing the distant, degraded echoes of guardians like this one? What if the genius loci wasn't a spirit, but the last remnant of an ancient alien security protocol? Here, the psychological profile of the guardian itself becomes the focus. Imagine the profound loneliness of this entity. It exists only to fulfill a purpose it cannot comprehend. It feels the slow pulse of magma, the strain of rock, the immense pressure of the deep earth. These are its senses. It has no companionship, no desire, no fear. It is a tool that has forgotten its maker. It is a warden who has forgotten. It is also a prisoner, bound to its post for an eternity it cannot measure. Its only stimulus is the detection of threats. When a large meteor strikes the other side of the planet, it registers the seismic shock, analyzes it, and dismisses it. When a new volcano chain forms, it subtly alters the local magnetic field to compensate, maintaining the perfect illusion of geological normalcy. But it has a blind spot, critical design flaw. The Sentinel was programmed by a being that thought in terms of cosmic threats and geological timescales. Its focus is deep. Its senses are attuned to the grand, slow movements of the Earth and the sudden, violent intrusions from space. It is designed to stop the Unraveler's warships or a future civilization's drills. It is utterly blind to the subtle, creeping changes of surface biology. The faint leak of shaper energy from the fugitive ruptured drive core, that informational catalyst for evolution, is too small, too biological, too fast for the slow, ponderous mind of the geological sentinel to even register. It is a rounding error in its calculations, a biological whisper and a geological roar. The guardian stands watch over the prison door, utterly unaware that inside the prison yard the inmates are being given the tools to evolve into something new. The perfect guardian, the eternal warden, continues its silent, lonely vigil, hiding the weapon from the universe. But the greatest danger wasn't a billion miles away in the dark of space. It was already there, germinating in the fertile, energy-rich soil right above its head. The question that hangs in the air is a chilling one. What happens when the guardian designed to protect a planet from intelligent life is completely unaware that it is actively, if accidentally, helping to create it? The guardian sleeps its slow, geological sleep, utterly consumed by its grand tectonic purpose. It is a masterpiece of deep-time engineering, a fortress of stone and fire. But its gaze is fixed on the stars above and the core below, completely blind to the revolution happening in the thin, fragile film of life on the planet's surface. The energy leaking from the fugitive's drive core is not a flood, but a mist. A persistent informational vapor that has been settling over the local biosphere for 2 million years. It doesn't cause grotesque mutations or radioactive monsters. The Shaper energy is far more insidious. It is a catalyst for complexity. You are watching a simulation of its effects, the timeline now compressed from millennia to mere seconds. You see the energy seep into the very code of life, the DNA of the creatures roaming the humid Cretaceous landscape. It doesn't rewrite the code, it optimizes it. It finds inefficiencies, tightens replication sequences, and enhances neural pathways. It is like a silent, planetary-scale software update pushing evolution into overdrive. And its effects are not distributed equally. It favors the organisms that already possess the seeds of complexity. It finds its perfect subject in a family of dinosaurs already poised on the brink of something more. The Dromaeosaurids, the raptors. This is where you must recalibrate your understanding of dinosaur intelligence. This is our verifiable fact. Paleontologists use a metric called the encephalization quotient (EQ) to estimate the intelligence of extinct animals. It is a ratio of an animal as actual brain size to the expected brain size for an animal of its body mass. Most large dinosaurs, like the sauropods, had incredibly low EQs. They were little more than walking, instinct-driven appetites. But Dromaeosaurids, like Deinonychus or Velociraptor, were a stark exception. Their EQs were closer to that of modern flightless birds like ostriches, suggesting a higher level of cognitive function, complex pack behavior, and problem-solving abilities. They were already the Einsteins of the Cretaceous. The Shaper energy simply found the smartest kid in the class and started giving it private tutoring. The simulation accelerates. You watch a single lineage of Dromaeosaurids near the epicenter of the energy leak. For 100 generations, the changes are almost imperceptible. A slight increase in cranium size, a subtle shift in the eye sockets, suggesting more advanced forward-facing vision. But then, the exponential curve kicks in. You see them using tools. At first, it's simple, a rock to crack open a turtle's shell. Then, a sharpened stick used to probe for grubs in a log. 1,000 years later, you see a pack of them ambushing a large herbivore, not with brute force, but with terrifying strategy. They use the terrain, driving their prey into a ravine. They use coordinated calls that are too complex to be mere instinct. They are communicating. This hyperacceleration of intelligence and culture is a concept that has a strange parallel in fringe human science. This is our bizarre detail. The biologist Rupert Sheldrake proposed the theory of morphogenetic fields. He suggested that there are invisible, organizing fields that act as a kind of collective memory for species. When a rat in a lab learns to solve a maze, it makes it infinitesimally easier for every other rat of that species anywhere in the world to solve the same maze because the solution has been imprinted on the field. The theory is dismissed by mainstream science, but what you are witnessing is Sheldrake's idea made terrifyingly real. The Shaper field acts as a biological internet for these emerging saurians, an innovation made by one Paka new tool. A new vocalization for an abstract concept, a new hunting tactic is instantly uploaded to the field, becoming an accessible instinct for the next generation, everywhere. Their cultural evolution is no longer limited by the speed of teaching. It is instantaneous. The psychological impact on the species must have been staggering. Imagine generations born with knowledge they never learned, instincts for things they've never seen. Imagine the dawn of self-awareness not as a slow philosophical awakening, but as a violent, confusing explosion of intelligence in a mind still wired for predation. They would have looked at their own claws, at their own reflections in a pool of water, and for the first time understood the concept of I. It would be a birth trauma on a planetary scale. The rise of a mind at war with its own savage heart. The simulation reaches its climax. The Dromaeosaurids have crossed a threshold. They're no longer clever animals. They are a people. You see them forming tribes, building crude shelters from woven branches and mud. Their language has evolved from clicks and calls into a sophisticated symphony of chirps, whistles, and subtle shifts in their feathered crests, capable of conveying past, future, and abstract philosophy. Their eyes, once the flat black beads of a reptile, now hold a chilling, analytical light. They are looking at the world not just as a place of food and danger, but as a place of resources and possibilities. They have become the first and only native intelligence of planet Earth. They are the Saurian kings, a civilization forged in the shadow of a cosmic war they know nothing about, their minds accidentally ignited by the dying spark of a long-dead hero. They now dominate their continent, their intelligence an insurmountable advantage over the brute force of the larger tyrannosaurs and the lumbering passivity of the herbivores. They are the undisputed masters of their world. But the narrative you are watching is not one of triumph. It's one of deep, unsettling dread. This new intelligence is not human. It is not mammalian. It is built on a reptilian chassis, a mind where the cold logic of survival is not a base instinct to be overcome, but the very foundation of its highest thoughts. The question that settles in your gut like a cold stone is profound. What kind of civilization does a species like this build? What are the dreams of a sapient predator? The dreams of a sapient predator are not of peace and harmony. They are of order, efficiency, and the perfect, logical expression of dominance. You are now moving through the simulation not as an omniscient observer, but as a silent specter walking through the heart of their world. 10,000 years have passed since their awakening. They are no longer a collection of tribes, but a unified planetary civilization. It is a world of claws and scales, a society built on principles that feel like a dark mirror of human potential. Their cities are not the sprawling, chaotic metropolises of mankind. They are brutalist, functional masterpieces of bioarchitecture. They haven't learned to forge metal or mix concrete. Instead, they have mastered a form of accelerated botany, using a combination of chemical secretions and sonic frequencies to grow their structures. You walk through canyons of living wood, hardened to the consistency of stone. Buildings are woven from plant matter as strong as carbon fiber. Bridges are single, massive vines, grown and guided across ravines. The aesthetic is stark, alien, and ruthlessly efficient. There is no art for art's sake. No decoration that doesn't also serve a function of buttress for support, a channel for water, a textured surface for a better grip. It is a city that grows, breathes, and lives, a testament to a complete mastery of biology that humans, with all their steel and glass, have never achieved. This level of biological engineering has a faint echo in our own world. This is our verifiable fact. In the Meghalaya state of India, the indigenous Khasi and Jainsha peoples have for centuries practiced a unique form of architecture. They guide the aerial roots of the Ficus elastica tree, the rubber fig, across rivers and ravines, weaving them into intricate lattice that, over decades, grow into strong, living bridges. These structures are self-repairing and become stronger over time as the roots thicken. It is a patient, symbiotic collaboration between humans and nature. The Saurians have taken this concept and weaponized it, compressing centuries of growth into mere seasons. Their society is a rigid caste system, not based on birth or wealth, but on pure biological aptitude. You see the castes? Clearly. It's the thinkers and planners, recognizable by their larger, more developed cranial crests, communicate in rapid, complex symphonies of clicks and whistles. They are the brains. The warriors, larger, more powerfully built, with reinforced scales and thicker claws, patrol the city's perimeter. They are the muscle. The workers, smaller and more nimble, tend to the living structures and cultivate the vast fungal farms in the city's understory. Every individual has a role determined from birth by their physical traits, a place in the great humming machine of the collective. There is no social mobility. There is no rebellion. To question one's place is as illogical as a claw questioning its purpose. This rigidly structured, biologically determined society brings to mind a strange and controversial chapter in human history. This is our bizarre detail. Project Cybersyn, or Cybernetic Synergy, was a Chilean project from 1971 to 1973. It was an attempt to build a distributed decision support system to manage Chile's entire national economy in real time. It used a network of telex machines to feed data from factories into a single futuristic operations room in Santiago, where managers would analyze it and make decisions. The project's ultimate goal was to create a socialist paradise of perfect, rational, computerized economic planning, removing the inefficiencies of human emotion and politics. It was a dream of a perfectly logical, centrally controlled state. The Saurian civilization is the terrifying biological fulfillment of that dream. It is a society that has optimized itself to the point of absolute stagnation. Here, the psychological horror of their civilization becomes apparent. There is no joy here. There's no love, no art, no laughter. There is only purpose. Life is a problem to be solved, and their society is the perfect solution. You witness a conversation between two thinkers. It is not a debate or a discussion. It is a rapid-fire exchange of data, a mutual debugging of a logistical problem regarding water distribution. When the optimal solution is found, they simply cease communication and move on. Their interaction has all the warmth of two computers exchanging a data packet. They have conquered their world, eliminated want and conflict, and in the process, have scoured their souls clean of anything that a human would recognize as life. They have become as cold, logical, and inhuman as the reptilian minds they evolved from. They live unknowingly on a ticking time bomb. The harmony of silence slumbers deep beneath their world, its existence utterly beyond their comprehension. Their planetary guardian, the geological sentinel, is equally oblivious to them. The Saurians are a biological anomaly the sentinel was never designed to detect. They are like intelligent mold growing on the wall of a nuclear silo. But their mastery of biology is leading them down a path of inevitable discovery. Their cities are not just on the surface. They're delving deeper. It's not with drills and excavators, but with specialized burrowing flora. They are tapping into geothermal vents for energy, seeking out rare minerals needed for their chemical catalysts. They are beginning to probe the deep earth. You see a map in their central planning chamber? It's not a drawing, but a living holographic display made of bioluminescent fungi. It shows their expanding underground network of root tunnels. And near the center, at the deepest point of their planned expansion, is a red zone. A region their geological probes cannot penetrate. A place of anomalous density and strange energy readings that their science cannot explain. They see it not as a warning, but as a challenge. A new problem to be solved. A new resource to be exploited. Their cold, relentless logic, the very trait that allowed them to conquer their planet, is now leading them directly toward the instrument of their own annihilation. The question that fills you with a chilling sense of dramatic irony is simple. What happens when a species that believes it has solved every problem finally encounters a problem that is unsolvable? The Saurian civilization did not know the concept of hesitation. To them, an unknown was not a source of fear, but a data deficiency, a problem awaiting an algorithm. The anomalous region deep beneath their central continent, the place their probes could not penetrate, was the ultimate problem. And so, you watch as the expedition begins, not with a roar of vengeance, but with a silent, determined pulse of biological will. This is not mining as humans would conceive it. There are no drills, no explosives. They have bred a specialized form of flora, a vast networked root system they call their earth tendril. It is a semi-sentient organism, guided by sonic commands from the thinker caste, capable of dissolving rock with acidic secretions and transporting waste material back to the surface. You watch their living map, the fungal hologram, as the tendrils descend. They move with unnerving speed, liquefying strata that took millions of years to form. Kilometers deep, they reach the boundary. The acid-secreting tips of the roots are rendered inert. Hardened, bone-like boring nodules are ground to dust. The tendril stops. On the surface, in the calm, quiet planning chambers, this is not a crisis. It is the arrival of new, interesting data. The material is logged, impossibly dense, unnaturally resistant to chemical and physical persuasion. For a species that has mastered biology, this is a fascinating new frontier, geology. Their relentless pursuit into the deep earth mirrors one of humanity's own grand and ultimately futile scientific endeavors. This is our verifiable fact. The Kola Superdeep Borehole was a Soviet scientific project to drill as deep as possible into the Earth's crust. From 1970 to 1992, they reached a depth of 12,262 meters, becoming the deepest artificial point on Earth. They found things they never expected. Water where it shouldn't be, rocks far hotter than models predicted, and microscopic fossils 2 billion years old. They kept digging for the sake of digging, driven by scientific curiosity and national pride, a desire to touch the unknown. The Saurians share this drive, but theirs is colder, more practical. The Soviets found unexpected science. The Saurians are about to find the end of the world. A new strategy is devised. A new organism is grown. It is a symbiotic creature, a fusion of fungus and a silicon-based microbe they discovered near geothermal vents. This new tool doesn't dissolve rock. It infiltrates its microscopic crystalline structure and, upon a sonic command, vibrates at a precise resonant frequency, shattering it from within. It is a subtle, elegant, and devastatingly effective solution. Oh, you watch as they deploy it. The deep earth tendril carries the new microbe to the barrier. The command is given. Deep beneath the planet, a high-frequency hum begins, inaudible on the surface. Microfractures appear in the Sentinel's masterpiece of geological shielding. The process is slow, but it is working. The Guardian, the great geomorphic Sentinel, has no protocol for this. A threat that does not hammer, but sings its way through the walls, was not in its programming. Finally, they break through. The tendrils emerge into a small, perfectly spherical cavern. And in the center, suspended in a shimmering gravitational field, is the weapon's containment unit. It is not the weapon itself, but the final box it was placed in by the fugitive scientist. It is a perfect dodecahedron, its surface a swirling, liquid-like metal that doesn't seem to have a fixed color. It pulses with a soft internal light, a gentle, rhythmic luminescence that feels ... inviting. It exudes a low, powerful hum, an energy field that the Saurians' instruments register as unbelievably potent and perfectly stable. They have just found a doomsday device, a cosmic sin buried out of shame and terror. Their conclusion? They have found God, or rather, the closest thing their logical minds can conceive of. A perfect, inexhaustible power source. The ultimate solution. This monumental misinterpretation has a strange historical precedent. This is our bizarre detail. 1936, workers near Baghdad unearthed a clay jar containing a copper cylinder and an iron rod. It is now known as the Baghdad Battery. Archaeologists are divided, but one theory suggests it was a primitive galvanic cell, capable of producing a small electrical charge. If so, its creators likely used it for something minor, like electroplating jewelry, or perhaps in a religious ritual to produce a tingling sensation to awe followers. They had, by accident, discovered the foundational principle of electricity, but saw it as a trinket, a minor curiosity. They held the power to light the world in their hands and used it as a magic trick. The Saurians are making the opposite mistake. They have found a bomb designed to end a world and see it as a battery. Their logic is their doom. See the data stream through their collective consciousness. The energy output is limitless. It could power their cities for eternity. It could fuel the growth of entire continents of bioarchitecture. It is the key to the next stage of their evolution. The decision is instantaneous and unanimous. You must tap into it. The Earth tendril begins to transform, growing delicate, needle-like probes designed to interface with the object, to draw its power. The Saurian civilization, a marvel of cold, calculating intelligence, stands on the precipice of its greatest triumph. Their minds afire with the promise of this beautiful, glowing heart they have found in the center of their world. But the real question, as the first biological probe makes contact with the alien metal, is a simple one. What happens when a key, designed to fit a lock, is instead mistaken for a jewel and placed upon the crown of a king? You are a ghost in the machine of the Saurian collective consciousness, and you feel a wave of what in a human would be called triumphant satisfaction. The biological probe, a marvel of directed evolution, makes contact with the shimmering liquid metal surface of the dodecahedron. The connection is instantaneous. A torrent of pure, clean energy flows up the Earth's tendril, flooding their nascent power grid. It is more than they could have possibly imagined. The fungal lights of their cities burn with a new, fierce intensity. The energy is stable, limitless, and perfectly compliant. In their cold, logical minds, they have not just found a new power source. They have validated their entire philosophy. They have encountered the ultimate unknown, applied their intelligence, and bent it to their will. The universe, it seems, is just another problem to be solved.
Ah,
But the fugitive scientist was not a fool. It was a member of a species that had witnessed the end of worlds, and its final act was one of profound, pessimistic genius. It understood that any civilization that found the weapon but was not advanced enough to comprehend its data log was, by definition, a threat. Any attempt to use the weapon as a simple power source would be the ultimate proof of this dangerous immaturity. The weapon was not just buried, it was booby-trapped with logic. This is our verifiable fact for this section: the principle of a failed deadly system. In military and nuclear command structures, a failed deadly device is one that executes its function if it stops receiving a positive all-clear signal. It's a system designed to guarantee retaliation, even if its command chain is destroyed. The harmony of silence was built on a similar but more nuanced principle: a fail-active trigger. It was designed to remain inert as long as it was left alone. But the moment it detected a crude, unauthorized attempt to tamper with its power core, its prime directive would switch from concealment to execution. The Saurians, in their hubris, believe they are siphoning power. What they are actually doing is completing a circuit. They have just inserted the key into the ignition of a doomsday machine and turned it. For a moment, all is well. The energy flows. The Saurian thinkers begin calculating the new potentials, planning the next 1,000 years of their perfect society, and then it stops. The torrent of energy ceases as abruptly as it began. Deep in the earth, the beautiful, inviting glow of the dodecahedron fades to black. Its liquid metal surface, once swirling with 1,000 unnamed colors, solidifies into a flat matte, non-reflective material. The gentle hum is gone. The heart has died. On the surface, the fungal lights dim back to their previous state. The Saurians experience their first collective system-wide failure. They do not panic. Panic is an illogical waste of energy. They are confused. They run diagnostics. The probe is functional. The connection is secure. The power source has simply ... turned off. This concept of a vast automated system of apocalypse has a chilling real-world precedent. This is our bizarre detail. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union created a system known as Perimeter, nicknamed Dead Hand in the West. It was a fully automatic nuclear command and control system. If it detected the signs of a nuclear attack on Soviet soil and could not establish contact with high command, it had the authority to independently initiate the launch of the entire Soviet nuclear arsenal. It was a machine built to ensure mutual assured destruction even if every human leader was dead. It was the planet's first true doomsday machine, an irreversible process waiting for a single, terrible trigger. The Saurians have just triggered a system born of the same paranoid galaxy-spanning logic. Their attempts to restart it fail. They send stronger sonic pulses as they try to reliquefy the surface with acid. The dodecahedron is now more inert than the rock around it. They have encountered something their science cannot explain, a device that offered them everything, and then took it away for no discernible reason. Their psychological reaction is telling. A human might have grown superstitious, fearful. The Saurians become obsessed. It is a puzzle, the greatest puzzle they have ever faced, and they refuse to be defeated. They dedicate a significant portion of their collective intelligence to solving it, unaware that they are trying to fix a switch that can only be thrown once. Meanwhile, the true activation sequence begins. It is silent, internal, and planetary in scale. The weapon, is it safe? Query having been answered with a definitive no, now begins its primary function. It starts to draw power, not from its own core, but from the planet itself. It sinks invisible energy tendrils deep into the Earth's mantle and outer core, beginning a slow, massive power-up sequence. The first signs are far too subtle for the Saurians to connect to their failed experiment. Tiny fractional increase in global volcanic activity. Series of minute deep earth tremors that their instruments register as background noise. The planet's magnetic field begins to fluctuate, but so slightly that it is dismissed as a solar flare anomaly. The countdown has begun. It is not measured in minutes or hours, but in the slow, agonizing gathering of geological force. The patient weapon is preparing to cleanse the world. The most intelligent beings on that world are completely oblivious, still stubbornly trying to pry open the box they should never have touched. The true horror is not the impending doom, but the quiet analytical hubris of the condemned. The real question, as you watch them redouble their futile efforts, is terrifying. How do you warn a species that has no concept of a warning? The saurians are not the only ones who notice the change. Deep in the mantle, the Guardian stirs. For millions of years, its existence has been a state of slow, patient, dreamless vigilance. It has felt the tectonic plates grind, the magma churn, the slow erosion of mountains. These are the normal, soothing rhythms of its world.
Ow.
But now, a new feeling. A dissonant chord in the planet's quiet symphony. A high-frequency vibration of immense power. Pulling energy from the very heart of the Earth. It is a feeling of violation, of a wound being torn open from the inside. The sentinel, the ghost of the fugitive's will, awakens from its long slumber. It is the warden hearing the prison walls themselves beginning to crumble. It consults its core programming, the directives burned into the rock, and the lingering psychic energy. The signature is unmistakable. It is the harmony of silence, no longer dormant, but actively powering up. The ultimate failure state, the one scenario it was created to prevent, has come to pass. Its primary purpose to contain and conceal has failed. The sentinel feels the closest thing its disembodied consciousness can to cold electric panic. It flexes its geological muscles, a last, desperate attempt to fulfill its duty. Immense tectonic pressure is applied to the chamber, enough to turn carbon into diamond. The weapon does not even register the strain. The sentinel tries to sever the energy tendrils the weapon has sunk into the mantle by creating a shear zone, a controlled subterranean earthquake. The tendrils phase through the rock, untouchable. It attempts to flood the entire region with magma, to drown the weapon in the planet's own blood. The magma cools and hardens against an invisible shield of force, forming a new useless layer around the activation site. The Guardian is failing. Its tools, once mighty enough to reshape a planet, are now like pebbles thrown against a fortress. Its degradation over 66 million years has taken a toll. This is our verifiable fact, the concept of bit rot, or data degradation. Digital information, even when stored on the most stable media, is not eternal. Cosmic rays, magnetic decay, and simple material breakdown can cause individual bits of data to flip, corrupting the information over time. A file stored for 1,000 years might be unreadable. The Sentinel is an organic geological computer that has been running for 66 million years. Its core programming is frayed. Its connection to the planetary machine it commands is weakened by eons of continental drift and random geological noise. It is a guardian, suffering from a form of cosmic dementia. Its memories of its purpose still clear, but its ability to act on them now clumsy and weak. It recognizes its impotence. Containment is no longer possible. Its ancient, decaying programming shifts to its final contingency, the last resort protocol, designed by the fugitive for this exact moment of catastrophic failure. This protocol has two parts, designed to be executed simultaneously. Part 1 is a message in a bottle thrown into a cosmic ocean. The Sentinel begins to gather all the ambient energy it can control geothermal. Magnetic kinetic focuses it into a single point on the surface. It is preparing to send a transmission, single, focused, ultra-narrowband burst of energy, aimed at the last known coordinates of the Shaper home world. It is a desperate, galaxy-spanning scream for help, a final report from a long-dead soldier. This act has a bizarre and famous parallel in human astronomy, the WOW signal. In 1977, a radio telescope in Ohio detected a powerful, 72-second-long narrowband signal from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius. It was so strong, so unique, and so perfectly matched to the expected profile of an intelligent interstellar transmission that the astronomer on duty, Jerry Emmon, circled it on the printout and wrote WOW. Beside it, it has never been detected again. It was a singular, powerful, and utterly unexplained cry in the cosmic darkness. The Sentinel is about to create its own. Part 2 of the protocol is colder, more pragmatic, and infinitely more tragic. The fugitive scientist understood that if the weapon was ever activated by a local species, that species was now the single greatest threat in the sector. The beacon is a long shot. The immediate threat must be neutralized. The protocol is labeled asset denial, and the asset is the biosphere. If the Guardian cannot stop the weapon, it must erase the ones who triggered it, to prevent them from ever wielding it. The Sentinel begins its terrible work. It is no longer trying to contain the weapon. It is now actively trying to destabilize the planet's surface ecology. It shifts its focus from deep Earth mechanics to surface-level chaos. It triggers a chain reaction of volcanic eruptions along a major tectonic fault line, not to relieve pressure, but to belch billions of tons of sulfur and ash into the atmosphere. It subtly alters the ocean currents, redirecting warm water to melt massive methane hydrate deposits on the seafloor. It initiates a series of deep, resonant earthquakes designed not for destruction, but to aerosolize vast quantities of dust. It is a scorched earth policy on a global scale. It cannot kill the bomb, so it will kill the world around it to keep it isolated. The Sentinel has become a monster to fulfill its mission. The Guardian has become an executioner. It is a profound mechanical tragedy. The Saurians, still stubbornly probing the dead dodecahedron, are utterly unaware that their world is now being actively, intelligently, and systematically murdered by the very same system designed to protect it. The real question, as to final protocols launch in terrible synchrony, is a race against time. What will arrive first, the weapon's fire or the Guardian's fury? The Guardian's fury is a masterpiece of geological violence. For the Saurians, it is the beginning of the great unraveling. Their perfect, ordered world begins to fray at the edges. A fine gray dust, the result of the Sentinel's aerosolization protocol, perpetually dims the sun, lowering global temperatures. A persistent, acidic rain, born from the chain of volcanic eruptions, begins to sicken their carefully cultivated bioarchitecture. The living cities, once vibrant and self-repairing, now show signs of blight and decay. Their collective consciousness registers this not as an attack, but as a complex cascading system's failure. A new set of environmental variables they had failed to model. They see it as their own error, a flaw in their understanding, and they dedicate vast intellectual resources to correcting it. They are trying to solve the riddle of a leaky roof while the foundations of their house are being systematically erased. Then, the chaos stops. As the harmony of silence reaches the final stage of its power-up sequence, its energy field expands, overriding the Sentinel's comparatively feeble influence. The deep earth tremors cease, the volcanoes fall silent, the dust begins to settle. For a brief, deceptive moment, an unnatural calm falls over the planet. In their planning chambers, the Saurian thinkers register the stabilization. A flicker of collective satisfaction ripples through their consciousness. They believe their countermeasures are working. They believe they have, once again, imposed logic on a chaotic system. They have never been more wrong. From the epicenter of the original impact, from the site of their failed excavation, it begins. There is no sound, no shockwave, no earthquake, only light. A perfect, silent column of incandescent energy, impossibly straight, rises from the ground and pierces the sky. It is not a color they have ever seen, a shimmering violet-white that seems to violate the very laws of optics. It does not illuminate the world around it. It seems to absorb the light, creating a zone of absolute blackness at its base. It is a pillar of anti-light, a physical manifestation of an erasure. The beam itself is not the weapon. It is the targeting system. It strikes the upper ionosphere and spreads out, creating a planetary-scale lens of energized particles. The atmosphere itself becomes the kill mechanism. This is a concept humanity has only just begun to explore. This is our verifiable fact, the High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Program HARP. Publicly, it is a scientific facility in Alaska designed to study the ionosphere by heating sections of it with powerful radio waves. But its potential as a weapon has been the subject of intense speculation for decades. The ability to manipulate the upper atmosphere could, in theory, disrupt global communications, alter weather patterns, or even be used as a directed energy weapon. The harmony of silence is the ultimate expression of this principle. It doesn't shoot a bullet. It turns the entire sky into a loaded gun. The chain reaction is instantaneous. The energy lens focuses the incoming solar radiation and excites the atmospheric gases to an unimaginable degree. The sky does not catch fire. The sky becomes fire. A wave of heat, moving at the speed of light, washes over the planet. It is not a fire that burns. It is a thermal event that unbinds. The air itself becomes a superheated plasma. Oceans do not just boil. The top several meters flash vaporize instantly, sending catastrophic plumes of steam into the already incandescent atmosphere. The great living cities of the Saurians, the wonders of bioarchitecture, do not burn. They desiccate, turn to black charcoal, and then to ash in a fraction of a second. This is the end of the Saurian civilization, and it is a psychological apocalypse as much as a physical one. You are there, in the final moment of their collective consciousness. For a species that has eliminated emotion, that has built its entire existence on the cold bedrock of logic, this is the ultimate horror. An event that cannot be analyzed, cannot be predicted, and cannot be survived. Their minds, for the first time, shatter under the weight of a reality that is purely, terrifyingly, and absolutely illogical. 1 billion minds, 1 million years of evolution. A perfect society, all reduced to a single, silent, collective scream of incomprehension before being erased. This vision of a world consumed by a sky of fire has a deep, primal echo in human mythology. This is our bizarre detail. The Norse myth of Ragnarok describes the end of the world, where the fire giant Surtur comes from the south with a sword brighter than the sun, setting the entire world ablaze. It is a story of a final, all-consuming fire that purges the world before a new one can be born. It is a myth, a fantasy, but perhaps it is a scar, a deeply buried genetic memory of a real event seen through the terrified eyes of our most distant mammalian ancestors. The weapon's energy pulse lasts for less than a minute, and then, as silently as it began, it stops. The beam vanishes. The sky slowly cools from white-hot to red to a bruised, hellish purple. The cleansing is complete. The planet is now sterile. But the weapon's purpose was not simply to kill. It was to erase. The real question, as the final echo of the Saurian scream fades into the silent, superheated air, is not about who died, but about the evidence they left behind. What happens to the fossil record when a planet is put in an oven? You are no longer a ghost in a machine. You are a detective, arriving at a 66-million-year-old crime scene. The simulation ends, leaving you back in the cold, humming reality of the analysis chamber. The data stream is complete. The story of the stolen weapon, the fugitive, the sentinel, and the hubris of the Saurians is laid bare on your console. But a story, no matter how compelling, is not proof. The scientific mind, even one that has just lived through a psychic data log, demands corroboration. You must now re-examine the physical evidence, the public record, through the lens of this new, terrifying perspective. The official story is an asteroid impact. Your story is a planetary execution. Does the evidence fit? You pull up the geological and paleontological data for the Cretaceous-Paleogene KPG extinction event. This is where you must look at the hard facts, the ones taught in universities, and see if they can tell a different tale. Our verifiable fact is the core evidence for the impact theory. The existence of shocked quartz and tektites in the KPG boundary layer worldwide. Shocked quartz is a form of quartz whose crystalline structure has been deformed by intense, instantaneous pressure, something that, on Earth, is only known to be created by nuclear explosions or meteorite impacts. Tektites are small, glassy globules of terrestrial rock that were melted, flung into the atmosphere, and cooled as they rained back down. These two pieces of evidence are the smoking gun for a kinetic impact event. But what if they're not? You run a new simulation based on the physics of the harmony of silence. The final atmospheric discharge was not an explosion. It was a thermal pulse of unimaginable intensity. You model its effects on the planet's surface. What happens to silicate sandstone when it is subjected to a sudden planet-wide temperature spike of thousands of degrees for several seconds? The simulation provides the answer. The water trapped in the porous rock would flash boil instantly, creating an internal pressure shockwave as powerful as any impact. The result, the crystalline structure of the quartz would deform. It would create shocked quartz, not from kinetic force, but from thermal shock. It's a different mechanism, but the end product is identical, in the tektites. The simulation shows the upper layers of the planet's surface rock being flash melted. This molten rock, hit by the incredible atmospheric turbulence of superheated, expanding gases, would be thrown high into the stratosphere. There, in the thin, cooling air, It would congeal into small, glassy spheres and rain back down on a scorched and dying world. The evidence fits. It fits perfectly. The smoking gun of the impact theory could just as easily be the smoking gun of a planetary-scale energy weapon discharge. It's a question of interpretation, of seeing the same evidence and choosing a different narrative. Then there is the matter of the fossil record itself. The extinction was not instantaneous. The fossil record shows a world that was already in decline for thousands of years before the final cataclysm. This has always been a complicating factor for the simple impact theory. Scientists call it the long decline versus the bad weekend debate. But in your new narrative, it makes perfect sense. The long decline was the work of the Sentinel, the volcanic winters, the poisoned oceans. The acid rain that was the Guardian's desperate, last-ditch asset denial protocol. It was already killing the world slowly, so the weapon simply finished the job in a single, terrible moment of efficiency. But where are the Saurians? Where is the evidence of their civilization, their cities of living wood, their tools, their bones? The thermal pulse provides the answer. The temperature was high enough to vaporize water and melt rock. Biological material, flesh, bone, wood would have stood no chance. It would not have burned. It would have sublimated, turning directly from solid to gas. There would be no fossils, no ruins, no bones. The harmony of silence was not just a weapon of mass destruction, it was a weapon of mass erasure. It was designed to leave no evidence, to wipe the slate perfectly clean. This is the bizarre, chilling detail at the heart of the crime scene. The utter lack of evidence is the evidence. The complete absence of a technologically advanced civilization's fossil record is exactly what you would expect. To find if they were wiped out by a weapon designed for perfect sterilization, this leaves only one final, crucial piece of evidence to re-examine: the iridium layer. The asteroid theory posits it was scattered from the vaporized impactor, but your narrative has the impactor burying itself deep in the crust. You run one last simulation. The final pulse of the weapon, the beam of anti-light, was not generated from nothing. It was created by converting matter to energy, but matter was at its source. The weapon's own containment unit, the dodecahedron, and the fugitive ship buried alongside it. You analyze the composition of the ship from the data log. It was a dense, exotic alloy, built to withstand the stresses of interstellar travel. And its primary structural element, used for its incredible density and stability, iridium, weapon consumed its own cradle and the ship of its forgotten master, converting them into the energy of the final blast. The iridium wasn't scattered by an impact. It was the atomic ash of the weapon's own housing, settling as a fine, uniform dust over a dead world. The ultimate calling card. The real question, as you stare at how perfectly every piece of public evidence now fits a secret history, is a terrifying one. If a lie is this perfect, how could the truth ever come to light? The lie is perfect. The evidence has been twisted to tell a simple, clean story of a random cosmic accident. The case is closed. But as you sit in the silent chamber, you realize that rock and sediment are not the only records of history. There is another ledger, one written in a language far older than stone. It is the language of life itself, the double helix of DNA. And while the weapon could erase bone and turn cities to ash, it could not erase the witnesses. They were small, furry, and terrified. They were the mammals, our ancestors. They were the trembling survivors who inherited a scorched and empty world. And they remembered, not consciously. They remembered in the way a fawn remembers to freeze at the snap of a twig, the way a bird remembers the path of a migration it has never flown. This is our verifiable fact, the existence of heritable, instinctual fear. Scientists have observed this phenomenon in labs. Mice, whose parents were exposed to a specific scent while receiving a mild electric shock, will show a fear response to that same scent, even without ever being shocked themselves. The trauma is passed down, not as a memory, but as a hardwired instinct, an epigenetic ghost haunting their nervous system. Our mammalian ancestors did not witness a mild shock. They witnessed a planetary apocalypse, the reign of a hyper-intelligent predator, and a sky that turned to fire. That level of trauma does not simply fade. It burns itself into the very fabric of a species' being. And so, you begin to search a different database. the collective unconscious of humanity, our myths, our legends, our oldest and most primal stories, and you find the ghost. It appears in nearly every culture on Earth, a creature so universal it might as well be an archetype buried in our DNA. It is the dragon. You have always thought of dragons as fantasy, the stuff of children's stories and epic poems. But now you look at the archetype through the lens of your new history, and a chilling recognition dawns. What is a dragon? In most cultures, it is a great reptile. It is often depicted as terrifyingly intelligent, cunning, and ancient. It is frequently associated with fire, a creature that breathes destruction. And crucially, it is often a guardian, a hoarder of some great treasure or forbidden knowledge. Now, think of the saurians. They were a sapient, reptilian species. Their thinker caste possessed a cold, calculating intelligence that would seem godlike to a primitive mammal. They were annihilated in a global firestorm, a sky of consuming flame. And they died because they found and hoarded a treasure of unimaginable power deep within the earth. The archetype is a perfect match. The myth of the dragon is not a fantasy. It is a fragmented, degraded, but terrifyingly accurate genetic memory of the saurian civilization. Our fascination and our fear are two sides of the same inherited coin. We tell stories of brave knights slaying them because our ancestors were the terrified mammals hiding from them. We imagine them as wise and powerful because, from the perspective of a shrew-like creature, they were. We depict them sitting on piles of gold because they died trying to harness a source of ultimate power. Every scale, every blast of fire, every glint of malevolent intelligence in their mythical eyes is an echo of a real-world horror, passed down through a million generations of terror. The connection becomes even more specific, even more bizarre, when you look at certain cultural interpretations. This is our quirky detail. In the esoteric traditions of China and Tibet, there is a concept known as lung mei, which translates to dragon lines. These are invisible lines of terrestrial energy that are said to flow across the landscape, converging at places of great power. Feng Shui masters sought to build temples and cities in harmony with these lines. It has always been dismissed as superstition. But what if it's a corrupted memory of something real? The saurians, with their mastery of biology, likely sensed the planet's energy fields. And the Sentinel, the planetary guardian, actively manipulated these geological energies for millions of years. The dragon lines are a memory of the world's real, invisible nervous system, a system the true dragons of this world understood, in which the guardian used to orchestrate their doom. This reframes our entire mythological landscape. It suggests that our oldest stories are not products of our imagination, but symptoms of a planetary-scale post-traumatic stress disorder. We are a species haunted by a ghost we can't name. We have spent millennia telling ourselves stories about dragons to process a truth our conscious minds can no longer access. That we are not the first children of this earth. We are the ones who inherited the ashes. The quiet ones who scurried out of the shadows after the real masters were wiped from existence. The psychological implications are staggering. It means our fear of the dark, our belief in monsters, our very capacity for imagining world-ending apocalypse might not be imaginative leaps, they might just be memories. You stare at the image of a medieval dragon on your screen. You see it now not as a monster, but as a victim. The last, twisted memory of a civilization that achieved perfect logic, only to be consumed by a force beyond its comprehension. Their story survived, not in stone, but in our nightmares. But as this revelation settles, a new, even more disturbing question begins to form. If the myth of the dragon is the ghost of the saurians and the cataclysm, is there another myth? Another echo hiding in our collective soul that remembers the other players in this cosmic drama? Where is the memory of the shapers who accidentally created them and the unravelers who hunted them? And most importantly, where is the memory of the second faction, the pursuers who arrived too late? The silence of the analysis chamber feels heavy, filled with the ghosts of dragons and the echoes of a world on fire. You have found the memory of the victims, the saurians, imprinted on the human psyche as myth. But this was a drama with three actors: the fugitive scientist, the saurians they accidentally created, and the pursuers who were chasing the weapon. The Sentinel's desperate, galaxy-spanning cry for help was aimed at the shapers, pleas sent to a home that may no longer exist. But the weapon's activation, that silent, planet-scouring pulse of energy, was its own kind of beacon. It was a dinner bell for the other side, final, unambiguous signal flare that announced, "The object you are looking for is here." You fast-forward the simulation. 10 million years pass in a blur of geological change and biological recovery. Continents drift, mountains rise and fall, the Earth is healing. The scorched black crust has long been buried under new layers of sediment. Life, tenacious and stubborn, has returned. The small, furry mammals that survived the apocalypse, our ancestors, have diversified, filling the ecological niches left vacant by the great reptiles. The planet is green and blue and teeming with new potential. It is into this recovering world that the second ship arrives. There is no fire, no chaos. It simply appears in high orbit, sliding out of a rift in space-time that heals itself without a scar. The vessel is the antithesis of the fugitive ship. It is not a thing of elegant curves and biological grace. It is a weaponized geometry, a craft of sharp angles and flat non-reflective surfaces, a brutalist shard of obsidian designed to intimidate the very fabric of space. It hangs in the silent darkness, utterly motionless, a predator waiting for the scent. It has been tracking the fugitive's faint warp signature for 10 million years, a bloodhound following a cold trail across an ocean of stars. Its scans of the planet are not gentle probes. They are violations. They wash over the surface with an intensity that leaves a mark. This is our verifiable fact. Around 56 million years ago, at the boundary between the Paleocene and Eocene epochs, the Earth experienced a period of extreme and rapid global warming, known as the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum PET. Global temperatures rose by way -8 degrees Celsius in just a few thousand years, a geological eye blink. The cause is a profound mystery. Theories range from volcanic activity to the release of methane hydrates. But no single model fully explains the speed and intensity of the event. Oh, you have a new theory? The Unraveler ship, powering its sophisticated deep scan technology, was leaking energy into the atmosphere, not the life-giving Shaper energy, but raw, chaotic thermal radiation. The PETM wasn't a natural climate event. It was the industrial exhaust from an alien search party. They find what they're looking for. Their scans penetrate the crust, ignoring the Sentinel's frayed and weakened camouflage. They locate the weapon. They also find the truth. The weapon is discharged. The energy signature of its activation is still faintly echoing in the planet's mantle. They analyze the fossil record, noting the abrupt end of the dominant reptilian species. They understand. They were too late. The primitives found the weapon, activated it, and wiped themselves out. For the beings on this ship, this is not a tragedy. It is an inefficiency. They are the Unravelers. Their purpose is erasure. Someone else has, in a sense, done their job for them. There is a sense of cold, detached frustration, like a demolition crew arriving to find the building has already collapsed. Their mission is a partial failure. The weapon, in its current discharged state, is useless to them. But their secondary, overarching directive remains: to monitor and curtail the stain of complexity. At this world, this Earth, is now an anomaly of the highest order. It was the hiding place for a Shaper weapon. It gave rise to a sapient species that managed to activate it. And now, a third wave of complex life is already well underway in the form of these rapidly evolving mammals. This planet is a stubborn weed in the otherwise clean pavement of the cosmos, cannot be ignored. And so, they make a decision. They will not leave. They will stay and watch. They need a silent, long-term observation post. From a bay in the dark ship, a small angular object is deployed, settles into a stable near-polar orbit, an orbit that is highly unusual for any natural satellite. This is our bizarre detail. The Black Knight satellite is a famous subject in UFO and conspiracy lore. It refers to a mysterious object, photographed by NASA astronauts and tracked by ground-based observers, that is said to be in a polar orbit of Earth. It fits the profile of no known man-made satellite or space debris. Believers claim it is an alien probe thousands of years old. Watch it deploy on your screen and you understand. The Black Knight is real. It is the Unraveler's unblinking eye, their first move in a new, colder game. The great brutalist ship then vanishes as silently as it appeared, retreating to a hidden post in the outer solar system, leaving its lonely sentinel behind. They have lost the weapon, but they have found a new experiment. The planet that birthed the dragons is now birthing a new kind of mind. The Unravelers are patient. They have all the time in the world. Their psychology is that of a cosmic exterminator. And the question that now dictates the next 56 million years of Earth's history is a chillingly practical one. When an exterminator finds a nest they thought was fumigated as already teeming with new life, do they pack up and leave, or do they simply switch to a new, slower-acting poison? The Unravelers' departure was not a retreat. It was a tactical repositioning. Their primary ship, a relic of the ancient war, was too large, too powerful, and its energy signature too loud for the subtle game they now intended to play. It withdrew to the cold, quiet darkness of the Kuiper Belt, a ghost hiding among a trillion icy ghosts. But it did not leave the system undefended. You watch the simulation as a swarm of smaller secondary craft detach from the mothership and disperse throughout the inner solar system. They are not scouts. They're automated sentinels, silent and patient. Their purpose to enforce a new quarantine. The search for the weapon is over. The search for its echo has just begun. The Unravelers are methodical. They dust the crime scene. Their probes descend to Earth, not to the surface, but to the deepest, most inaccessible parts of the ocean. They are looking for fragments, for residual technology from the fugitive's ship, for any piece of the puzzle they can find. You watch as a probe locates a shard of the ship's hull, a piece of the same object lupus that your own civilization would one day recover. The Unravelers analyze it, their scanners picking apart its atomic structure, reverse engineering the principles of Shaper technology. This is our verifiable fact for the section, the Mariana Trench. At nearly 11,000 meters deep, it is the deepest point on Earth, a place of crushing pressure and absolute darkness. We know less about it than we do about the surface of the moon. It is the perfect place to conduct a secret, planetary-scale forensic investigation without ever being noticed by the surface-dwelling life. The strange, unexplained bioduct sounds and other acoustic anomalies recorded by deep-sea probes in the trench could easily be the echoes of this ancient, silent search. The search yields a terrible discovery. It's not a piece of technology they find, but a piece of information buried in a degraded fragment of the fugitive's data log. It is the record of the Shaper energy, the informational catalyst that had accidentally sparked the Saurians' intelligence. They realize what happened. The fugitive did not just hide a weapon, they inadvertently planted a garden. And now the Unravelers can see the fruits of that garden all around them. The mammals are evolving at an accelerated rate. Their brains are growing more complex. Social structures are forming. In the Unravelers' cold, nihilistic worldview, this is an unacceptable contamination. The Shaper's sin of creation is perpetuating itself. Their mission clarifies. It is no longer enough to simply observe. They must now actively suppress. But how? A direct, overt intervention, another planetary cleansing is inefficient. It would only scorch the surface and the Shaper energy. Now deeply integrated into the planet's biosphere, would simply start the process again. It would be like weeding a garden with a flamethrower. They need a more subtle poison. They need to turn the new species' greatest assets, emerging intelligence, against itself. Their plan is as brilliant as it is diabolical. They will not destroy the new race of primates that is beginning to dominate the planet. They will guide it. They will manipulate it. They will nudge its evolutionary path not towards enlightenment, but towards self-destruction. This is where the story intersects with one of humanity's most enduring and bizarre mysteries. This is our quirky detail. The Dogon people of Mali possess an astonishingly complex and detailed astronomical knowledge. Their traditions passed down through generations speak of the star Sirius and its invisible companion, Sirius B, a white dwarf star not officially discovered by Western astronomy until 1862. The Dogon knew its 50-year orbital period, its incredible density, and even described a third star in the system, Sirius C, whose existence is still debated by astronomers. They claim this knowledge was given to them by amphibious gods from the Sirius system, the Namo. Anthropologists are baffled. How could a pre-industrial society have knowledge that was impossible to obtain without advanced telescopes? The Unravelers provide the answer. It was them. It was a test, a pilot program. They chose an isolated tribe and fed them specific, verifiable, but ultimately useless information. They were testing the channels of influence, learning how to implant ideas into the fertile soil of the human mind, to see if a myth could be created from whole cloth. The Doggone were their first successful experiment in cultural engineering. The psychological dimension of the Unravelers' new strategy is what makes it so terrifying. They are not warriors anymore. They are farmers, and humanity is their crop. They will cultivate our religions, our philosophies, our conflicts. They will feed us just enough truth to make the lies believable. They will sow seeds of division, of tribalism, of greed. They will watch us build civilizations and then give us the tools to tear them down. Their goal is to create a species so consumed by its own internal conflicts, so enamored with its own cleverness, that it will inevitably engineer its own extinction, doing the Unravelers' job for them. They will turn us into a self-solving problem. The silent search is over. Silent war has just begun. The Unravelers, the masters of erasure, have found their ultimate weapon, US. It will not kill us with fire from the sky. It will kill us with whispers in the dark, with ideas disguised as revelation, with technologies that promise progress but deliver only more efficient means of destruction. The question that hangs over the next 2 million years of human history is no longer about our past, but our future. How do you fight an enemy who has turned your own mind into the battlefield? The Unravelers are beings of infinite patience. Their war against complexity is not a sprint. It is an erosion, a slow, grinding process measured in geological epochs. The Black Knight satellite is their eye in the sky, a passive sensor gathering baseline data on the new dominant species. But observation is not enough. To wage their subtle psychological war, they need a laboratory. They need a forward operating base, a place to analyze, plan, and execute their long-term strategy of guided self-destruction. The Kuiper Belt is too distant. Mars is too obvious. They choose a location of perfect, quiet elegance. The Earth's own moon. It is the ultimate blind spot. Tidally locked, it offers a permanent, unblinking view of the entire planet from its far side, forever hidden from terrestrial eyes. It is close enough for low-energy communication and intervention, yet distant enough to be safe. You watch in the simulation as one of the smaller angular craft detaches from the main swarm and makes its silent descent. It does not land on the surface. It phases through it, using a technology that destabilizes matter at a quantum level. The ship sinks into the lunar crust near the South Polacan Basin, the largest and oldest impact crater on the moon. Deep beneath the surface, it hollows out a vast complex of chambers, and tunnels without displacing a single gram of rock, converting the lunar regolith directly into the energy needed for the construction. The base is not built on the moon. It is carved into its heart, a cancer in the satellite's core. From the surface, there is nothing. It's not a track, not a building, not a heat signature. It is the perfect covert observation post. But no system is perfectly efficient. This hidden base, with its vast power core and sophisticated systems, occasionally leaks energy. A communications array might briefly energize the surrounding rock, causing it to glow with an eerie, unnatural light. A venting of waste heat might create a momentary, localized atmosphere that flashes in the harsh sunlight. For centuries, astronomers on Earth have documented these fleeting, inexplicable events. This is our verifiable fact. Transient lunar phenomena, TLP. Since at least the 12th century, observers have reported seeing brief flashes, colorful glows, and spreading mists on the lunar surface, often in the same locations, like the crater Aristarchus. These events defy easy explanation and are a quiet, persistent mystery in astronomy. Now see them for what they are, the occasional sparks flying from the Unravelers' hidden anvil. The life of the Unraveler operatives in this base is one of cold, detached science. They are entomologists, and humanity is their ant farm. They watch our ancestors climb down from the trees. They listen as our first grunts and clicks evolve into the complex syntax of language. They observe the birth of tribes, the discovery of fire, the first crude paintings on a cave wall. To them, these are not moments of wonder, but the emergence of new variables in a complex equation. They build a psychological model of the human species, a perfect map of our fears, our desires, our tribal instincts, our capacity for both altruism and atrocity. They identify the fault lines in our psyche, the weaknesses they can exploit. Their passive observation occasionally intersects with our own burgeoning curiosity, creating the foundation for modern myths. This is our bizarre detail. In the 1970s and 80s, a group of fringe researchers, most notably Richard C. Hoagland, began meticulously analyzing NASA's archive of lunar photographs. They claimed to have found evidence of artificial structures: the shard, a towering glass-like spire; the castle, a complex geometric structure perched on a crater rim. NASA dismisses these as tricks of light and shadow, digital artifacts on low-resolution images. But you see the truth. They are not permanent structures. You watch as the Unraveler base occasionally needs to vent a massive buildup of energy or deploy a specialized long-range sensor. For a few seconds, a crystalline antenna, miles high, might rise from the lunar surface before retracting. A complex sensor array might unfold, catching the sun at a strange angle. The anomalies in NASA's photos are real. They are fleeting glimpses of a machine that is not supposed to exist, caught by accident by our own primitive probes. The base is more than an observation post. 'Tis a broadcast studio. It is from here that they conducted the Dogon experiment, a controlled test to see if they could implant complex information into a pre-industrial culture. The test was a success. It proved that the human mind was receptive to divine revelation, that knowledge could be granted, and that it would be woven into the fabric of myth and religion, its origins forgotten. The Unravelers now possess a proven method of influence. They can whisper in humanity's ear. And we will call it the voice of God. The Unraveler scientists in their sterile, silent, subterranean world have completed their analysis. They understand our biology, our psychology, and our nascent sociology better than we do ourselves. They have mapped our soul and identified all its vulnerabilities. The period of passive observation is over. The time for active intervention has arrived. They see the path of our evolution stretching out before them, a path that could, if left untended, lead to the stars another wave of Shaper-inspired complexity spreading through the galaxy. This cannot be allowed. The experiment must be corrupted. The real question, as they stand before their perfect model of the human mind, is a chillingly strategic one. How do you subtly rewrite the very source code of a species to ensure it will always choose the path of conflict over the path of unity? From their silent, sterile base, carved into the heart of the moon, the Unravelers analyze their dilemma. Cultural manipulation is effective, but it is slow, and its results are unpredictable. They have seen enough. The nascent human species, with its shaper, catalyzed potential for complexity, is a weed that grows too fast. To simply poison the soil with divisive ideologies is not enough. They need to rewrite the plant's DNA to ensure that it will always grow towards the fire. They decide to move from cultural engineering to biological engineering. The goal is not to create a better human, but a more efficient instrument of self-destruction. Their method is one of supreme, untouchable subtlety. There are no landing parties, no abductions, no crude physical experiments. They have the complete human genome mapped, and they have identified the levers within it. The tool for their manipulation is already present. A ghost in our own machine. A fossil embedded in every cell of our bodies. This is our verifiable fact. Approximately 8% of the human genome is composed of human endogenous retroviruses, HERVs. These are the remnants of ancient viral infections that millions of years ago inserted their genetic code into the DNA of our primate ancestors. Most of this viral code is dormant, inactive junk DNA, a silent testament to a long history of plagues and survival, but it is still there, set of switches waiting. The Unravelers, with their mastery of physics, develop a new tool, a highly complex, maser-like beam of energy, tuned to a specific set of resonant frequencies. It is a signal that can penetrate Earth's atmosphere and interact directly with the delicate molecular structure of DNA without harming the host organism. Their plan is to broadcast an activation key to flip some of these dormant viral switches in a targeted population of early humans. The simulation shifts focus to Earth around 70,000 years ago. A small, isolated population of Homo sapiens in Africa is on the brink of extinction, their numbers dwindling. The unravelers see their chance. They're not carpet-bombing the species with new genes. They're performing delicate, targeted microsurgery on a specific, vulnerable bloodline. The beam is fired from the moon. It is invisible, intangible. On Earth, nothing seems to happen. But in the gonads of a few hundred individuals in the germline cells that will create the next generation, something fundamental changes. A specific set of RVs, ones that regulate neural development and hormonal responses, are switched on. The change is subtle, heritable, and irreversible. The results are not immediate. But 50,000 years ago, a mysterious and profound change occurs in the archaeological record. Anthropologists call it the Upper Paleolithic Revolution, or the Great Leap. Forward. This is our bizarre and fascinating detail. For hundreds of thousands of years, the technology and culture of early humans had been remarkably static. Their stone tools changed very little. Then, suddenly, there is an explosion of innovation. Sophisticated new tools made of bone and ivory appear. Complex projectile weapons like the atlatl are invented. And most importantly, art is born. Cave paintings of stunning complexity, intricate carvings, jewelry, symbolic, abstract, and spiritual universe erupts into being. Scientists have long debated the cause of this sudden revolution. Was it a climate shift? A random genetic mutation? The Unraveler narrative provides a chilling answer. This was the moment their program, it's delivered 20,000 years earlier, finally booted up. The psychological changes are exactly what the Unravelers designed. The activation of the IRVs did not just make humans smarter. It rewired our brains for a specific kind of intelligence. First, it supercharged our capacity for abstract thought. This allows for complex language, art, religion, and eventually, science and technology. This is the trait that will one day allow us to rediscover the principles of the harmony of silence. Second, it amplified our instinct for in-group loyalty and out-group suspicion. This trait, so useful for the survival of small tribes, becomes a catastrophic liability in a global civilization, ensuring we will always find reasons to build walls and wage wars. Finally, and most diabolically, it created a slight but critical decoupling of cognitive ability from emotional empathy. It made us clever but not necessarily wise. It gave us the ability to design a factory farm or a nuclear weapon without being paralyzed by the moral and emotional implications of our own creations. The Unravelers have created the perfect self-destructing organism, a species with the godlike ambition for abstract thought, the primal animalistic drive of tribalism, and a sociopathic gap between its intellect and its compassion. They have set a time bomb, and the timer is the speed of our own technological advancement. They will watch from their silent lunar throne as we invent the spear, the sword, the cannon, and eventually the atom bomb. They have turned our evolution into a race to see whether we can achieve global unity. Before our tribal instincts and our emotionless cleverness lead us to annihilate ourselves, it is a wager they are confident they will win. But they have also introduced a wild card. They have made us dangerously intelligent. The same abstract thought that will lead us to the bomb might also lead us to the stars, to the moon, and to the truth. The real question as you watch our altered ancestors paint the first bison on a cave wall is now deeply personal. Are our greatest achievements and our most terrible flaws truly our own, or are they just the features of a weapon someone else designed? The Unravelers have remade you. Your species, born from the Shaper-infused earth, has been edited, its source code subtly corrupted. The hardware is now in place, a brain capable of brilliant abstraction, shackled to a heart wired for primal tribalism. But hardware is useless without software. Now begins the second phase of their grand, silent war, the installation of the operating system. They must provide the ideologies, the belief systems, the truths that will steer your genetically programmed self-destructive tendencies towards their inevitable conclusion. They will not reveal themselves. They will become the quiet inspiration behind your own worst ideas. They do this by exploiting a fundamental flaw they engineered into your psyche: the hunger for hidden knowledge. You, as a species, are desperate for meaning in a silent universe. You crave patterns, you seek purpose, and you are intensely drawn to the idea that there's a secret truth, a key that will unlock power and understanding known only to a chosen few. This desire makes you vulnerable. It makes you easy to lead. The Unravelers' method is to feed this hunger. They don't send prophets or land ships on Capitol lawns. They whisper, a nudge to an archaeologist to dig in a specific spot, an anomalous radio signal that sounds like a voice, a dream planted in the mind of a susceptible mystic that feels like a divine vision. They plant a seed, and then they watch as your own culture, your own ambition, and your own ego grow it into a forest of dogma and conflict. No period in your history was a more fertile ground for this strategy than the late 19th and early 20th centuries. It was an age of scientific revolution and spiritual anxiety, a world where old gods were dying and people were desperate for new ones. It is in this environment that you see the Unravelers' guiding hand most clearly. You focus on a specific case study: the esoteric societies of post-World War I Germany. This brings us to a verifiable, if murky, piece of history: the legend of the Vril Society. While its formal existence is debated by historians, its ideas were undeniably influential in the occult underpinnings of Nazism. It was believed to be a secret society of telepathic mediums, led by Maria Orsic, who were in contact with an advanced race of beings living deep within the earth. The goal of the Vril Society was to understand and harness a cosmic energy source called Vril, force that could grant superhuman powers and fuel fantastical flying machines. This is where the Unravelers' genius for manipulation is laid bare. This is our bizarre detail. The entire concept of Vril energy and a subterranean superrace does not come from any ancient text or divine revelation. It comes from an 1871 science fiction novel, The Coming Race, by Edward Bulwer Lytton. The Unravelers did not need to invent a complex mythology. They simply picked up a piece of your own fiction, identified a group of people who wanted desperately for it to be real, and whispered, "It is." They fed the confirmation bias of a few influential occultists, who then built an entire belief system around it. The Vril Society became a tool. Its members convinced they were channeling ancient Aryan ancestors or extraterrestrial masters, when in fact they were listening to the carefully curated static broadcast from the moon. The psychological trap is perfect. For the members of the Vril Society and the associated Thule Society, they were the chosen ones. They possessed a secret that would restore their nation's power and grant them mastery over a degenerate world. They were not evil in their own minds. They were crusaders for a higher truth. The Unravelers had successfully weaponized the human ego. They had created an in-group of supposed supermen, which, by definition, created an out-group of subhumans who needed to be subjugated or eliminated. They didn't command the Nazis to commit genocide. They simply provided the ideological framework that made genocide seem like a logical, even necessary, step towards a glorious destiny. From the cold, dark tranquility of their lunar base, the Unravelers watch World War II unfold. To them, it is not a tragedy. It is a stunningly successful field test. Their manipulated primates, fueled by an ideology they themselves had subtly cultivated, are using their abstract intelligence to commit atrocities on an industrial scale. They have turned the entire planet into a laboratory of death. The war is the ultimate expression of their genetic engineering, tribalism amplified by technology, and it produces the exact result they had been guiding humanity towards for 50,000 years, the creation of the ultimate tool of self-annihilation. The Manhattan Project. The atomic bomb. Humanity, the Unravelers' prize crop, has finally produced its poison fruit. The experiment is nearing its final successful conclusion. But as you watch the mushroom cloud bloom over the New Mexico desert in the simulation, you realize the Unravelers have been focused entirely on manipulating the new species. They have forgotten about the old ghosts. The real question, as humanity enters the atomic age, is a chilling one. What has the original weapon, the harmony of silence, been doing for the last 66 million years? The Unravelers on the moon experience the closest thing their species has to satisfaction. The Cold War is the glorious culmination of their 50,000-year project, or genetically modified primates, now organized into two opposing ideological blocks, or holding a gun to their own heads. The doctrine of mutually assured destruction is the perfect expression of the unraveler philosophy, a system of logic designed to achieve total erasure. They no longer need to whisper. They simply watch, with the cold detachment of a scientist observing a chemical reaction reaching its violent conclusion. They have turned your planet into a self-dismantling bomb, and they are merely waiting for the inevitable detonation. But their focus is myopic. They are entomologists so obsessed with the behavior of the ants in their farm that they have forgotten the geology of the ground the farm is built on. While they have been patiently guiding your evolution towards suicide, an older, more powerful player has been silently gathering its strength. The narrative returns to you. You are back in the present day, in the sterile, low-light chamber of the ghost library. The psychic residue of the data log has faded, leaving you with a terrible clarity. You have the secret history of the world, but it is a story with no witnesses and no proof. You are a Cassandra with a top-secret security clearance. But there is one final avenue to explore. You turn your attention to the vast, global network of radio telescopes, the planet's collective ear. This brings us to a well-known verifiable endeavor, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence SETI. For over 60 years, humanity has been systematically listening to the cosmos, pointing massive dishes at distant stars, straining to hear a single intelligent whisper in the overwhelming roar of cosmic background noise. It is a project fueled by a profound hope, a desire to know that we are not alone. And for 60 years, the dominant answer from the universe has been the Great Silence. You begin to sift through the archives, not of Seed-Eye's public data, but of its classified military counterpart. The same dishes that listen for alien broadcasts also listen for enemy satellites and clandestine transmissions. You are not looking for a complex message. You are looking for a ghost. You use the same quantum AI that decrypted the fugitive's log, but this time you give it a new task. You instruct it to analyze decades of raw radio signal data from all sources, terrestrial and celestial, to filter out everything that can be identified, nor all known natural phenomena. Pulsars, quasars, background radiation. Ignore all known human-made signals. Satellites, radio broadcasts, military communications. You are asking the most powerful data analysis tool in history to show you only the anomalies that have no explanation. The AI churns for hours, and then it presents a single file. It is a signal first logged in 1978 by a deep space surveillance station in Australia. It's a faint, repeating pulse of ultra-low frequency energy. It has a perfect metronomic rhythm, repeating every 172 minutes. It is so faint, so close to the background noise, that for decades it was dismissed as a systemic echo, a ghost in the machinery of the station itself. This is our bizarre and unnerving detail, an echo of the Cold War's hidden world. The signal bears a striking resemblance to the broadcasts from so-called number stations. Mysterious shortwave radio stations that broadcast endless streams of spoken numbers believed to be coded messages for spies. They are repetitive, monotonous, and their purpose is officially unacknowledged. This signal was the deep space equivalent, a persistent, meaningless pulse that intelligence agencies logged, classified, and ultimately ignored because it corresponded to no known technology and served no discernible purpose. It was codenamed the hum and filed away. But your AI has done what no human analyst could. It has cross-referenced the hum with every other listening post on the planet over a 40-year period. It has filtered out the atmospheric distortion, the solar interference, and the instrumental noise. The hum is not an echo. It is real. And it is not coming from deep space. The AI triangulates its source with chilling precision. It is coming from Earth, from a single, unmoving point with coordinates that make the blood run cold in your veins, the exact geometric center of the Chicxulub crater. In a flash of horrifying insight, you understand. The harmony of silence, the original planet killer, was never truly dead. Its final apocalyptic discharge, 66 million years ago, depleted its primary power core. But it was designed by the Shapers, masters of cosmic gardening and sustainable energy. It was built with a secondary passive charging system. For 66 million years it has been lying dormant, a leviathan asleep in the deep, patiently absorbing the background energy of the planet. It has been trickle charging, sipping geothermal heat from the mantle, converting the kinetic energy of tectonic shifts, absorbing the faint radiation of the planet's core. And this signal, this steady metronomic pulse, is not a message. It's a status indicator. This is the blinking light on a charging battery. After an eternity of slumber, the weapon is waking up. The Unravelers, in their hubris, have missed it entirely. They are so focused on the self-destructive children that they have forgotten about the loaded gun they left buried in the playroom. Their entire millennial-long project of manipulating humanity could be rendered moot at any moment. The game has changed. A silent two-player Cold War between the Unravelers and humanity is about to be interrupted by the original and most powerful piece on the board. The real question, as you watch the steady rhythmic pulse on your screen, is no longer about who will win the struggle for Earth, but what is the purpose of a doomsday weapon that recharges itself? The steady rhythmic pulse on your screen is the sound of a clock. A 66-million-year-old clock, ticking towards an unknown midnight. The discovery of the hum shatters the fragile peace of your new understanding. The Unravelers on the moon are a problem for the next century. The waking Leviathan beneath the Yucatan Peninsula is a problem for now. You are no longer just an analyst piecing together a secret history. You are the first person on Earth to realize that the planet's most famous extinction event was not a one-time tragedy, but the first stage of a recurring automated cycle. A planetary reset switch. Your first instinct is to sound the alarm. But who do you tell? And what do you say? That a ghost in a machine told you a fairy tale about cosmic wars, and that the Chicxulub crater is a recharging doomsday device? You would be institutionalized before you finish the sentence. The secrecy of your own position is a prison. But you are not the only one who knows about the hum. You are just the only one who understands it. You dig deeper, accessing the highest levels of signals intelligence archives, and there you find it, evidence of a clandestine international race against time that has been running in the shadows for decades. This is our verifiable fact. The Five Eyes is a real-world intelligence alliance comprising the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. It is the most extensive and powerful intelligence sharing network on Earth, but your clearance gives you access to a deeper layer. The Sixth Eye Committee, a cabal so secret most heads of state don't even know it exists. It consists of a handful of military and scientific leaders from the core Five Eyes nations. It's tasked with analyzing existential threats that fall outside the normal geopolitical framework. They've known about the hum since the 1980s. They don't know what it is, but they know it's powerful, artificial, and its energy output is slowly, steadily increasing. For 40 years, this secret committee has been pouring trillions of dollars into black projects. Trying to understand the source of the hum, they have built their own Deperth scanners, their own exotic particle detectors. They have reached the same conclusion as the Saurians. There is an object of unimaginable power buried deep in the Earth. And like the Saurians, their first and only thought has been, how do we control it? How do we weaponize it? You watch archived satellite footage of covert military operations in the Gulf of Mexico, of submarines deploying strange probes, of scientific drilling platforms that are anything but. It is a frantic, desperate race, not against an enemy nation, but against their own ignorance, fueled by the terrifying prospect that a rival might get there first. This changes the psychological dynamic completely. You are not alone, but you are on the opposite side of a philosophical chasm. They see a potential weapon. You're having lived the fugitive's memory. No, it is a trap. This is where the fugitive's true genius, their ultimate long-term plan, becomes clear. Why would a weapon need to recharge? Doesn't. This isn't a weapon anymore, it's a test. A final exam for planetary sentience. The fugitive scientists knew they couldn't guard the harmony of silence forever, so they've repurposed it. This is their final desperate gambit, a legacy left for a species they could only hope would be wiser than their own. Upon reaching full charge, the weapon will not simply fire. The data log was clear on this secondary protocol. It will first broadcast a single, complex, unsolvable problem. The cosmic riddle, test of a species' character. A species that tries to brute force it, to control it. To weaponize it, a species like the Saurians. or like the one you see reflected in the actions of the Sixth Eye Committee, will fail the test. And the consequence of failure is immediate, automated planetary cleansing. But a species that recognizes the riddle for what it is, a species that can demonstrate the wisdom, creativity, and philosophical maturity to solve it, will pass. Passing the test does not grant them a weapon. It unlocks the fugitive's greatest gift, the complete archives of the Shapers. All their science, their history, their art, it is a cosmic inheritance, a key to a galactic civilization offered only to those who can prove they are worthy of it. This idea of a test, a message that can only be unlocked by a certain level of understanding, is a concept you've seen before. This is our bizarre detail. The Voynich manuscript, a 15th century book written in an unknown alphabet and filled with impossible botanical drawings, is a perfect human-scale analog. For centuries, the world's greatest cryptographers have tried and failed to break its code. Many now believe it is not a code to be broken, but a language to be learned. You cannot brute force it. You must understand the mind of its creator. The harmony of silence is the Voynich manuscript on a planetary scale. It's not a lock to be picked, but a question to be answered. You are now in possession of the most dangerous secret in human history. The world's superpowers are in a clandestine race to acquire what they think is the ultimate weapon. When their very actions are pushing the planet closer to the brink of a final exam, they are guaranteed to fail. The ticking clock of the hum is not a countdown to an explosion. It is a countdown to a question. And the wrong answer means extinction. The real question that now falls on your shoulders and yours alone. It's a seemingly impossible one. How do you convince a civilization of hammer wielders that the solution to this problem is unto bigger hammer? The weight of this knowledge is a physical presence in the room. It presses down on you, a crushing psychic gravity. You are a single node of sanity in a global network of institutionalized madness. You have the answer key to a test that will determine the fate of the world. But the students, the leaders of the Sixth Eye Committee, don't even know they're in a classroom. They think they're in an arms race. Your perspective shifts. This is no longer just an intelligence problem. It is a psychological one. You must understand the minds of the men and women who hold the fate of the planet in their hands. You dive into the most secure files you can access, the full, unredacted psychological profiles of the handful of individuals who make up the Sixth Eye Committee. These are not politicians. They're military strategists, physicists, and career intelligence officers. They're the smartest, most pragmatic, most ruthless people on the planet. They're the products of a lifetime spent in a world of zero-sum games. A world where security is measured in megatons and influence is a function of military power. They are the ultimate expression of the unraveler's genetic experiment. Brilliant, tribal, and emotionally detached from the consequences of their calculations. Reading their profiles is like reading a case study in high-functioning paranoia. They see threats everywhere because their entire worldview is threat-based. To them, the buried object is a prize to be won, an Excalibur that will grant its wielder dominion over all others. The idea that it could be anything else a test, a trap, a gift is so far outside their operational parameters that it wouldn't even register as a possibility. It would be dismissed as sentimental, naive, and dangerously weak. This is a verifiable psychological principle, known as cognitive entrenchment.
Experts,
By the very nature of their deep but narrow knowledge, often become rigid in their thinking, unable to solve problems that require a perspective outside their field of expertise. They become the man with a hammer to whom every problem looks like a nail. The Sixth Eye Committee is a room full of the world's most brilliant hammer wielders. Their obsession with secrecy is not just professional, it is pathological. The need-to-know principle has become a secular religion. This culture of secrecy has its own bizarre and tragic history. This is our quirky detail. The giggle incontinence incident of 1962 is a little-known but chilling example. During a high-stakes Cold War simulation, a junior officer at NORAD, overwhelmed by the stress and the absurdity of the nuclear escalation scenarios, broke down into uncontrollable laughter. The incident was immediately classified at the highest level. Not because it revealed a weakness in their systems, but because it revealed a weakness in their psychology. It was an admission that the human mind was not built to handle the soul-crushing pressure of nuclear command. The lesson the military learned was not to reevaluate the sanity of their doctrine. but to double down on secrecy and psychological screening. To ensure that no one with a human weakness ever got close to the button again. This is the mind you are up against. A mind that has been systematically purged of doubt, of empathy, of humor. A mind that has been trained to believe that secrecy is safety and that power is the only truth. How do you communicate with a mind like that? Can't. To present them with the datalog story would be suicide. They would see you as a threat to be neutralized, a compromised asset spouting dangerous nonsense. You must find another way. You cannot change their minds, but perhaps you can change the problem. The plan forms in your mind, a desperate, elegant, and monumentally dangerous gambit. It is an act of informational warfare. You are going to leak the truth, not all of it. Not the story of the shapers and the unravelers that is too unbelievable. You will leak the core, undeniable, and terrifyingly plausible components. You will construct a false narrative around a core of truth. You will create a new historical mystery for the world to obsess over. You will leak documents carefully fabricated but based on the real data that prove the hum is a countdown. That prove the Chicxulub crater is an energy source. That prove the world's powers are racing to control it. You will create a global panic, a worldwide loss of faith in the very governments who are sworn to protect their people. Why? Because the Sixth Eye Committee operates in darkness. Their power is derived from their secrecy. You are going to drag their entire operation into the blinding light of public scrutiny. You will force their hand. You will create a situation where keeping the secret is more dangerous than revealing it. A global population that knows it is sitting on a time bomb will not tolerate being kept in the dark by a handful of generals. They will demand answers, will demand a global, unified response. You will use the power of global panic to force the very international cooperation that the committee's paranoia makes impossible. It is an act of supreme rebellion, a betrayal of your every oath, and the only path to survival you can see. The psychological pressure on you is immense, a mirror of the giggle incontinence. But the real question is no longer about the burden of knowledge. It is about the courage to act upon it. Can you, a single person in a dark room, orchestrate a global intellectual revolution? While you, in your subterranean chamber, prepare to set the world on fire with truth? Another fire is being kindled in the cold heart of the moon. In their silent, sterile base, the unravelers watch. For them, the last 70 years have been a period of immense quiet satisfaction. The Cold War, the rise of global terrorism, the proliferation of biological and chemical agents, the polarization of politics through digital media, it is all proceeding according to their predictive models. Their grand experiment in guided self-destruction is nearing its apex. They have become masters of human psychology, playing nations and ideologies against each other, like pieces on a board, all while remaining utterly invisible. Then they detect it. The hum. They are not looking for it. Their sensors are tuned to the cacophony of human activity. Radio waves, internet traffic, biological markers. The faint, metronomic pulse from the planet's core is so far outside their parameters of interest that for years, their own systems have been filtering it out as geological background noise. It is an intern-level analyst, running a deep diagnostic on the sensor network, that first flags the signal's perfect artificial rhythm. The discovery sends a ripple of something akin to alarm through their cold, collective consciousness. They access their own archives, the records from their first arrival, 56 million years ago. They see the energy signature of the discharged harmony of silence. They compare it to the new signal. Conclusion is instantaneous and horrifying. The weapon is recharging. The entire foundation of their 50,000-year project, a masterpiece of subtle manipulation, has been built on a catastrophic miscalculation. They were playing a delicate game of chess in a room where they failed to notice the ceiling was slowly descending. This is a classic strategic failure, one recognized in human systems analysis. It is our verifiable fact, path dependence. This is the principle that decisions made in the past constrain future options, even if those past decisions are no longer optimal. The unravelers have become so path-dependent on their guide humanity to suicide strategy that they have become blind to any other variable. Their entire operational dogma is now obsolete. The psychological shock is profound. They are the unravelers, the agents of cosmic entropy, the bringers of the Great Silence. Their entire philosophy is predicated on the idea that they are the ultimate arbiters of cosmic complexity. But this is self-resetting planetary testes, a system of erasure more elegant and more patient than their own. They are not the ultimate filter for life on this planet. They are just another, less efficient one. This reframes their entire identity. This is our bizarre detail, a concept from the study of the Fermi paradox. The great filter. This is the idea that there is some evolutionary or technological barrier that is so difficult to overcome that it prevents most intelligent life from ever becoming interstellar. The Unravelers thought they were humanity's great filter. Now they realize the Chicxulub weapon is the true test, and their entire multi-millennial effort has been a sideshow. A different filter that was ultimately irrelevant to the final exam. Their dilemma is now stark and absolute. They have three options: do nothing, allow events to unfold. Humanity will face the weapons test. Given the state of global divisionist state, the Unravelers themselves have carefully cultivated humanity is almost certain to fail. The planet will be cleansed. Mission accomplished. But this is a hollow victory. It is an admission that their grand experiment was meaningless, that they were simply spectators to a pre-programmed event. For a species as proud as the Unravelers, this is an unacceptable blow to their ego. Help humanity. They could leak the solution to the test, the information needed to pass and inherit the Shaper archives. This is philosophically impossible. To actively aid the proliferation of Shaper-inspired complexity is a violation of their most sacred directive. It is an act of racial and religious treason. Intervene directly. They could attempt a preemptive strike. Not against the weapon they know they cannot defeat it, but against humanity. If they can wipe out the human race before the weapon reaches full power, they can prevent any possibility, however remote, of humanity passing the test and unlocking the Shaper legacy. This is the only option that aligns with their core philosophy. It is the ultimate act of cosmic nihilism, to murder the student to prevent them from ever graduating. As they debate this terrible calculus, a new alert flashes across their displays. It is a surge of data on Earth, chaotic and unprecedented. They zoom in, their sensors monitoring the planet's fledgling global network. They see your leak. They watch as your fabricated documents, your seeds of curated truth, begin to spread like a virus through the digital consciousness of humanity. They see a single human, a single insignificant primate, attempting to unilaterally alter the course of the entire experiment. This is an intolerable contamination of the data. Your actions have just shattered their predictive models. They can no longer be certain of humanity's response. You have introduced chaos, a wild card that threatens everything. The debate is over. Your desperate gambit has forced their hand. They cannot wait for the test. They cannot predict what a panicked, partially informed humanity will do. Their carefully controlled ant farm is now on fire, and the ants are scattering in unpredictable directions. Their dilemma is no longer a philosophical one. It is a tactical emergency. The Unravelers must act, and they must act now. Before your desperate attempt to save your species gives them the one thing they cannot allow, a fighting chance. The real question, as their silent lunar base shifts from observation mode to battle readiness, is a final one. Do they double down on their mission of erasure? Or do they concede failure and simply bear witness to the end of a game they have already lost? The decision of the Unravelers is as cold and silent as the void they worship. They will not intervene. In their subterranean lunar base, a consensus is reached, not through debate, but through a cascade of chillingly logical conclusions. To destroy humanity now would be an admission of panic, a messy and inefficient act that would contaminate the final, most valuable data set. To help them would be a philosophical betrayal. And so, they choose the third most insulting option. They will do nothing. They will simply bear witness. They reconfigure their base from a broadcast studio of psychological warfare into a passive observatory of cosmic significance. They will record humanity's final moments with the detached curiosity of a scientist watching a cell die under a microscope. Their grand experiment has failed, but the data from the failure itself is still priceless. They, the would-be great filter, will now sit back and watch the true great filter do its work. On Earth, your act of informational terrorism detonates with the force of 1,000 revelations. At first it is dismissed. It is a conspiracy theory, a hoax, another piece of digital detritus in the endless ocean of the internet. But your curated data is too specific, too detailed. It contains call signs, project code names, and geophysical data points that are, with difficulty, verifiable. A rogue astronomer in Chile, intrigued by your leaked coordinates, frames their equipment and confirms the hum. A graduate student in Japan, running your data through a public seismic model, confirms the anomalous density beneath Chicxulub. This is our verifiable fact, the power of information cascades. A few initial confirmations, shared on social media, create a feedback loop. People begin to believe it not because they have seen the evidence, but because they see other people believing it. The narrative catches fire. Within weeks, the world is consumed. Denial from governments is met with derision. The Sixth Eye Committee, the most secret organization on Earth, is dragged blinking into the sunlight, its name and its purpose plastered across every news feed on the planet. Their power, built on the bedrock of absolute secrecy, evaporates overnight. Global markets crash. Riots break out in major cities. A fragile global order already strained shatters completely. Humanity is unified for the first time in its history, unified in sheer abject terror. And then, the planet itself adds its voice to the chorus. This is our bizarre and final detail. In 1997, the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration detected a powerful, ultra-low-frequency underwater sound in the South Pacific. It was nicknamed the bloop. Its acoustic profile was unique, and its source was never definitively identified. Now, a new bloop is heard, and another, and another. All around the world, deep-sea hydrophones begin picking up a chorus of deep, resonant groans, as if the planet itself is stirring in its sleep. The weapon, in its final stages of charging, is causing resonant frequencies throughout the planetary crust. The world is not just humming anymore, it is moaning. You stand back and watch the beautiful, terrible chaos you have unleashed. You have broken the world to save it, forcing a global conversation that was never supposed to happen. All eyes, all resources, all remaining scientific minds are now focused on a single point on the map, a crater in Mexico. The human race, fractured and terrified, is finally facing the same problem together. The question of what to do next hangs over the entire species. The answer is not yet written. It is the first line of humanity's final, and perhaps only, truly collaborative chapter. And so, the story ends here, on the precipice of a question. The screen before you fades to black, and the hum of the supercomputer dissolves into the familiar, quiet sounds of your own world.
Ow!
The narrative is over. The thread followed to its terrifying, uncertain conclusion. Take a moment. Feel the solid ground beneath your feet. Listen to the gentle, mundane rhythm of your own breathing. What we have unraveled here, together, is a thread of possibility, a thought experiment woven from the dark threads of history and the silent expanse of the cosmos. It is a story of a stolen weapon, a forgotten civilization, and a species that may have been a pawn in a game it never knew was being played. And perhaps that is the final, calming truth. Our history may not be our own, our instincts may not be our own, but the present moment, this quiet intake of breath, is undeniably ours. We are here now, awake and aware in a universe of sleeping mysteries. Perhaps the deepest truth is that we are a cosmic accident, a fleeting spark of consciousness that awoke in the ruins of a forgotten kingdom. Now standing before a final exam we were never, ever meant to take.